So what do you think, Daniel? Would you like to, should we get going?
Can start this introduction. I have 3 slides.
I'll just do a quick little, and then I'll hand over to Lily and she'll get to you. So hi everyone, and welcome. It's a pleasure to see you all, or even just your names on screens. My name is Simon Ellis. I'm an artist and scholar here at the Centre for Dance Research. My colleagues, Lily Hayward-Smith and Kate Marsh, and I are responsible for the C-DaRE Invites program. And this current series of C-DaRE Invites is called The Body and AI, and it's broadly a collection of conversations, debates, and I guess events that explore, been thinking about as like the datification of the human body. And today's event, called Encoding Embodied Creativity, is the second event in this series, this Dance and AI series, and it's been organized by C-DaRE's Marie Curie Fellow, Daniel Bisig, and it's part of the culmination of his fellowship. So I'm very, very much looking forward to the provocations, the stimulation, and I guess the intellectual nourishment of the afternoon. Just for the speakers, I'm actually going to also be timekeeper, which, as we joked before, it's a little bit nerve-wracking when there's a Swiss person in the room. And there's just shy of two, at least two. We're just going to be just a little bit shy of 35 minutes for each conversation or each presentation, and that includes time for questions. So at 25 minutes, this is to the speakers, I'm going to vocally, I guess, say, okay, let's shift to a discussion, and I'll also be the timekeeper for when we switch over. Then about halfway through, there'll be after 3 presentations and conversations, we'll have a little break just for people to stretch the legs, go to the toilet or whatever. So Lily, over to you just with a little bit of other etiquette stuff.
Thank you, Simon. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. So we've probably all done lots of Zooms by now, but just a reminder to stay muted until we come to sort of discussion time. But you feel free to keep video on and off, switch it on and off whenever you feel like it. But just a reminder that we're recording today's event, and that will be shared sort of publicly and to document the event. And if you need to use the live transcripts, then you can turn that on or off if it's come on automatically at the bottom of the screen. Should be in there. You can click, if you've got 3 little dots, you can click more and go to live transcript. And as Simon said, there'll be a time for discussion at the end of each presentation, and just feel free to post any questions and things in the chat, and then we'll try and get through those when the time comes. And we will fit in a comfort break between the sort of presentations. So after 3 of the presentations, we'll have 5 or so minutes for that. And yeah, if you have any difficulties or anything with the tech during the Zoom, then feel free to message me or Simon privately, and we'll try and help you out. But other than that, I think I'll hand over to Daniel to get started.
Okay, thank you, Lily and Simon. So I try my luck with sharing the slides. Okay, so hi everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this symposium, Encoding Embodied Creativity. This symposium, my name is Daniel Bisig. I'm a researcher at the Center for Dance Research at Kochi University. And as Simon already mentioned, this symposium marks the conclusion of my Marie Curie Fellowship entitled E2-Create. Let's see if we can switch here. Yeah. So during this fellowship, I explored how embodied principles in dance, principles of creativity in dance, can inform other artistic approaches, in particular those approaches that employ computational methods or generative methods. So in a nutshell, this fellowship has been an amazing opportunity for me to deepen my understanding of contemporary dance and to use this deepened understanding to develop generative systems, machine learning models that can be used, and some of them have already been used in artistic creations. I don't want to spend too much of your time talking about my fellowship. So for those of you who want to learn more about this fellowship, there are 2 blogs here at the bottom of the page. The left one of these is the project blog, which provides an overview of the activities that have taken place during the fellowship. And the blog on the right is kind of an educational resource that provides articles, tutorials about most of the topics that were important to me during the fellowship. Then on to the symposium. So as the title implies, Encoding Embodied Creativity is the assumption that creativity in dance can be codified, and in the context of this fellowship, codification means essentially translation into computer code. So this approach is based on the premise that at least some approaches, creative approaches and principles in dance, can be abstracted, can be formalized, can be transformed into procedures that when they are executed by a machine, such as a computer, then they reproduce these principles in a synthetic form. So during the fellowship, I have been super busy with the usual day-to-day activities of writing programs, software programs, writing papers, contributing to artistic creations. So now at the end of the fellowship is a good time to take a step back and look at this premise from a broader perspective. So that was this symposium is about. So I've invited 6 experts to provide their thoughts, present their approaches of dealing with creative principles in dance in the computational domain. These experts, they represent a wide diversity of artistic and scientific disciplines, all of which I consider very important to shed some light on the diversity of possibilities and also implications of this approach. So the disciplines represented are dance, obviously, but also music. There's a focus on movement sonification, new media, especially virtual reality, computer science, such as semantic modeling of data, and then philosophy, with a focus on the ontology of dance, and robotics for modeling embodied principles of intelligence. So I'm super excited to hear the inputs from these presenters. So there is a total of 6 presentations. I can skip the part that I prepared concerning the logistics of the presentation. Simon already did this. So I would like to directly go ahead and invite the first speaker. So I will invite and introduce each speaker right before his or her talk. So the first speaker is Gilles Jobin. Hello, Gilles Jobin. So Gilles Jobin is creative director of the dance company C-DaRE, Gilles Jobin. He is not only a very accomplished choreographer, but he is also one of the pioneers of combining motion capture and virtual reality in dance productions. So the title of his presentation will be, sorry for this, Exploring the New Digital Territories for Contemporary Dance. Gilles Jobin, the stage is yours.
All right. Well, hello everybody. So I'm Gilles Jobin. I'm here in Geneva, Switzerland, in my studio. And so before exploring the digital territories, we're going to explore my studio. So I'm going to take you with me because so I have this dance studio here in Geneva. Here is a very important place, which is the kitchen where we have lunch. Pablo and Muriel that just appeared, they know it because, and also Daniel, because they did the residency quite recently. So this is the main studio. So you see, this is the regie, and we have at the moment dancers that are warming up, 3 dancers that are warming up because we're working on a project called Virtual Crossings that we will be presenting at the end of September. So, hello, Susanna, Mael, and Ivan. And so the particularity of these dance studios is that we have 42 optical camera by Qualisys. Maybe I can show you one here. Look at this beauty. So we have about 40 of those, which means that we can really do next level motion capture experiment and investigation. And the studio has been just recently refurbished, so now it's much more practical because we have a grill to hang up our cameras. And the goal of this studio now is also to share it with artists, to invite, for research residency around movement and motion capture. And because I think that for us choreographers and dancers, I mean, the digital revolution started probably with sound, and you could reproduce the sound to the CD, digitization of sound. Then it was the image, the 2D image, that you could do so many things and digitalize it. And maybe the digitalization of movement is the last digitalization. So that's why now it becomes more accessible to capture the movement in 3D, into a 3D space. And also we develop some system to work on live performances at a distance. So that's why my presentation is called, so let me share my screen. You tell me if it's fine. Let me just play it. It's okay? You see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. Okay, so that's why I call it, we have this new concept, this hashtag tour without traveling, motion capture and live digital performance. So I'm going to go and try not to pass my time. What's going on? Okay, so I just wanted to show you, because I show you the studio, that's something that we did yesterday. That's what they were working on yesterday, actually. So we're preparing this project called Virtual Crossing, which is a collaborative project. So this is a setup that we were testing yesterday from an artist called Laurent Novak and Camille de Dieu. So they will be collaborating with them on this project. Will be a live performance. We're going to build our motion capture space inside an old cinema, and so people will be able to see the motion capture live and the result on the screen. And we'll also present a piece called Cosmogony that we did recently. Okay, so yeah, so I'm a choreographer, so that's some images of the different pieces I've been doing all over the years. So like I'm a classical contemporary dance choreographer, if you want, but then I got into 3D really when just probably before the pandemic, around 2016, I discovered the power of motion capture, and it was so impressive to be able to capture the movement and be in 3D with your own body or somebody else's body. So that was for me very fascinating, and I think choreographers has this kind of sense of working in 3D, because 3D is what we do. We work with volume. Then we did this piece called VRI. So VRI was a piece where people were wearing a backpack and they had markers on their bodies, on their hands, their feet, and they could see themselves as avatars and interact with each other. And these are the 5 people, real people and their avatars. So they could interact with each other, and they could see us, the dancers, moving around them, very big dancers. And there was all this unfolding of events, and they were witnessing this in real time. So for them, the sensation was that they were in real time. So that was very interesting to see how people embodied the movement. I mean, somehow they would like dance more than they would with their proper body than with their avatar body. So there was this kind of digital embodiment, I call it, which is very striking when you get to live this, to kind of see yourself and like, be a digital body. So when COVID came, of course, it was a bit of a disaster. We had a piece that was going on stage, so we were all under lockdown. So we had 2 of those motion capture suits called from Rococo, which are accelerometer suits, so easy to use. So we started to try to perform live at a distance. So we did some experiment with Camilo, our technologist. He was in lockdown in Fribourg, about 100 kilometers away from Geneva. So we started the first test, and it was quite amazing to be in in my room and be live 100 kilometers away. So from this on, we moved on to we had to do this program for Arte about VRI, but because of the pandemic, we couldn't do it. So we said, well, maybe we're developing this system to work at a distance. Maybe we could do it at a distance. So the presenter of the program, Sylvia, you can see her, Sylvia Camarda, she's a choreographer from Luxembourg. So we sent her one of those Rococo suits. We made her an avatar, and she was pregnant, so we made her a pregnant avatar. And this is Tristan, our 3D artist. And we sent her the Rococo suit, and she could wear it in her living room in Luxembourg. And she had a team on her side to film her, and we had a team on our side to film us. So it was like a online international production live, which we had also to develop not only how we would be live, but together and dance together, but also how do we communicate with the production that was somewhere in Hamburg, I think, and some in Geneva. And so we developed a lot of the tools that we would use later in the next project. So now you can see her in her apartment, and now she's dancing with Susanna on the stage of the Comédie, which is a theater that we modelized for another project. So we managed to meet for the first time with Sylvia. Now we have met for real, but we had this meeting and this kind of special feeling that we felt of dancing together. And I think it's very similar to what we would have if we had met for real. Why? He's always jumping. Okay, so now I'm going to show some of the work that we did, and I'm going to talk through. So this is we also did some work in augmented reality. So this is Magic Window. It's a permanent installation in Lausanne. So it's an app for iOS, and people, they use their iPad or phone to trigger the animation by scanning. There's a marker on the floor, and that means that the animation stay put in space. This is another one. This is Dance Trail, and Dance Trail is an app you can download it from for iOS and Android able AR phone, and you can use it for free, and you can place dancers anywhere you want in the world, in your world. And this is in front. This was in an exhibition. This is a piece called Real Time, which was the one that was interrupted by COVID. So we were 1.5 months before the opening, and we had to stop. So we were experimenting with live mocap and projection, and also virtual cameras, and exchanging avatars, like changing like the dance. So they have different avatars, various screens. So also this was very useful for us to develop the whole tech that we used later when we decided to go like 100% digital. Because when COVID came and this show was canceled, this project was canceled, I say, well, we just stop. We're not going to redo it later. I just paid everybody to the end, and I thought let's move on to something else, because we had all this equipment. And this knowledge also, we thought, well, we are able to go 100% digital. So I thought the way out of this crisis was to take a bold step and a radical step and to say, well, I'm not a stage company anymore, I'm a digital company. And here you see us in the studio. This is La Comédie Virtuelle. So it's a digitalization of a theater that was under construction in Geneva, and we finished it, this modelization before it was constructed. So it's a way for people to be able to visit it in VR. And we put inside some animations. And we always thought that we would have live performances inside. But we thought that, maybe in 2 or 3 years, or like it was a bit early to do this. So we only play some animation inside. But of course, when the crisis, the COVID came, and we talked with the people at the Venice Festival and telling them that we had this project to make a live piece, they were super interested. So in June, we presented a demo, and in end of August, we premiered this piece in Venice. So it was very, very fast. And here you can see some of the images. And just to make it a little bit more complicated, we had one dancer in Bangalore, it's Dia on the upper right corner, and lower down is Victoria. She was in Melbourne. And we were in our studio in Geneva. So that was an added complication and you know, and how to synchronize all those different people in the same space so they are able to dance together. But basically, we developed this tech. I mean, we didn't develop it really, but we know how to use it and how to make it work. Like we can bring any motion capture system into 3D software such as Unity. So then we were not like, the piece was not like fully finished. So then we did the second part, and that's the second part that we did later, where people would just continue in a big garden. So it was a big journey. Maybe I didn't mention, it was a multi-user piece. So we had sometimes like 13 or 14 different nationalities joining together from China, South America, all with different time zones. This is another project called Virtual Crossings, which is the one we're going to do also in here in Geneva, which is a collaborative project where we bring together a cluster of digital artists for collaboration in real time and at a distance. So we share our technology or network technology so we can work together and collaborate together. And it's a very interesting thing to do. We did one in Buenos Aires and one with the Melbourne University, VCA Dance. They have their own mocap studio as well, much bigger than mine. And this is the piece Cosmogony. That is the latest piece that we did, because I thought, you know, VR, it's nice, but we need to have something that is a bit more accessible and using the same kind of live performances. So I thought, you know, 2D screening is much more easy. It's easier to do. You can do it as a video mapping, as we did in Bucharest. Or you can do it as a projection in a cinema, as we did in Singapore. And that's now the main format where we're presenting it. And because it's server-based, we can also present it simultaneously in the various places at the same time. So, for instance, we will be in November in 3 dance festivals in Italy, in 3 different cities at the same time. When we're going to present here in Geneva, it's going to be live also on local TV. And we're going to also perform here in Geneva for in-presence audience in Geneva and people watching the result in the Theater Cour on the other side of Switzerland. So that was in Singapore. In Singapore, originally was supposed to be 100-meter wide video mapping, but because of the pandemic, like 1 week before, they say, oh no, you know, we cannot bring people together. You have to go inside the theater. So they send it was 100-meter wide video mapping, and they sent us inside the theater for only 50 people, a 2,000-seater. So, you know, we had a lot of different problems, even though we had this very flexible system. But when we were at Sundance, we were supposed to screen it in a real cinema at the Egyptian, which was the demonstration we wanted to do to the industry that we could do live cinema. And I'm not live now; it's live, but cinema. But then COVID also made the festival digital only, so we missed that demonstration. But we still have faith, and we continue to work, and that's really our area of interest. Yeah, I think I went through the whole thing, and I'm ready for questions or comments.
Thanks a lot, Gilles, for fabulous input.
If you don't have, I can keep on talking.
Yeah. Let's see what happens now if there is questions in the...
I don't hear you.
You don't hear me?
Oh, I don't hear anyone. Sorry. What's wrong? Oh, it's me. Wait. Okay.
Again, 1, 2, 3.
That's why there was no question, because I had no sound.
Exactly. You missed all the questions. No, there haven't been any questions so far, so maybe I wait a moment. I have one question of my own, but I wait first for maybe other questions.
But I think maybe I just add a general comment. I think what I found like so interesting now is to have this kind of flexibility of you know, making work, and how you can transform the body, and how the digital allows you to make like impossible things, like having like 35 meters high dancers. So all the possibility of the digital, that's why I say exploring the digital territories, because they seem to be accessible now. Like it's quite recent that at such a scale. I know there's some people that have been working in the digital for many years, but I think it's like an exponential access with the headset and the VR and the power of the PC. So now it becomes more, I think, accessible, but still for dancers and choreographers, access to mocap studio is very difficult. You mostly have commercial studio or university studios that have different difficulty of access. So it's very difficult to find a comprehensive space where you can research in movement and in mocap under 150,000 to 200,000 euro equipment. And even in some cases, you can even fund those residencies, as we did with Pablo and Muriel and Daniel, through an association with La Comédie. So, it's really the idea of making like a proper dance studio, a mocap studio from the point of view of the performing arts, and to create like a knowledge, like growing knowledge, and by inviting international artists and local artists, create like a community, an ecosystem, creative ecosystem, and always with this kind of point of view of the performing arts.
And Rosa.
Oh yes, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I suppose my question follows on to what you were just saying around the network and this idea of an ecosystem. Were the dancers you were working with for many of the projects, or for those where you had them in different locations, were they used to working with mocap and the tech, or was it their first time? And if it was their first time, was there kind of pre-meetings, or did you have more experienced dancers sharing their experiences beforehand? Or because I'm curious, when you go into that process, I don't know, I think that there are different experiences and approaches you might have depending on your own relationship to the technology. So I just wonder if you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, there's always a first time. So there's always, that moment to which this digital embodiment is very kind of exciting, I think, for any dancers to see themselves moving, making like the puppeteer of their own body somehow, and then see it again, afterwards. So there's this first joy. Then there's a few things that you need to ask them. For instance, like, are you patient? Can you wait without complaining? So there's a few requisites, which I think the first one is patience. But then after that is just a guide. We guide them through, and we also discover together. But of course, if I can, I always work with the same dancer as long as possible. So Dia and Victoria, they went, Dia, she was living in India, but she came to Switzerland to work on the first digital pieces, and then she will fly back to India. And as we did the same with Victoria. But when lockdown came, I couldn't fly them over anymore. So I thought, in a way, I wanted to keep the relation with them at a distance, and also I wanted to give work to them. There was like both question in my mind, like I cannot leave them like doing nothing, and so I thought, I need to do something. So then they had to learn how to use the Rococo alone from where they are. There was, we had to give them support. And now we have, Susanna is super experienced. We have some new dancers coming in, like Ivan, it's his first experience. Maëlle, she was before. But somehow we have our system. We know every time we introduce them better, we know better how to talk to them and how to introduce them to the system. And there's some rules and and we have our own style also. And because it's not only just dancing in mocap, it's like, how do you work, choreographically in such a small space? It's not so big. The mocap space about 8x6 or 6x7. So you have to find like a lot of strategies to kind of, if you work with different scales. So there's all this kind of understanding that your body can be multiplied and sent into different places, and there's this sensation of kind of this, it's a teleportation. I asked a particle physicist and if it could be considered as teleportation, and he said yes. And I was like, yes. It is, in a way, like you really do send your real body in real time on the other side of the world. So something happened that has to do with the body. So I think dancers are very sensible to these kind of things. And they are also very good in general and precise and specialists of the 3D space. Sometimes they don't know it, like they don't realize it, but they understand very well, because that's what they do for a living, is to make space significant, create meaning with space between the people, not only being in space, but like, the relation between two bodies, and so this is the same in VR. And also there's the question of real time. I think most of the VR experiences are in real time. You live the experience in real time as a spectator. You feel in real time. So I think choreographers and performing art people in general, we know how to deal with real time, unlike cinema people that deal with loop and cut, and they play with time. We play with the time passing by, like as I say, when we go to a theater, we all grow old together. We all come out of the theater 1 hour older. Dancers, artists, technicians, people at the bar, everybody's 1 hour older or 2 when they go out. So this synchronicity of the real time is something that dancers understand like super well. So that works really. I mean, I think we have a lot of very good intuition, and I'm sure around some people will confirm this. And dance in general always be upfront. I mean, foresight, of course, but before that, Cunningham and many more. Even the first tryout with light. The light was experimented by dancers because the body is abstract and concrete at the same time. It's a good, yeah. So I mean, they're good. They're just good. Dancers are good. Contemporary dancers are very
good. Gilles, I'll go ahead because I put my hand up, and just to quickly ask and follow on what you've been saying, because I kind of thinking about a lot of what you've referred to are the things that dancers already know. In other words, they come from a background of training, and that training's not involved the digital so much. So it's involved being in space and presence with each other and being able to touch and have that kind of proximity. And just out of curiosity, I mean, if that begins to recede, that kind of opportunity, so there's less, let's say there's less training like that and more training that actually occurs in the digital space, kind of knowledge becoming, accruing in that space around bodies. I wonder what kind of, I wonder what kind of knowledge that will generate then, in terms of dancers' knowledge, their embodied knowledge. Just a thought.
Yeah, I don't know what to say because I'm not a teacher, I'm not a pedagogue. So, I do things and then I just see like the result, how dancers are empowered somehow by this. I met already 2 dancers digitally that I'm working with. One, she's from Hong Kong, her name is Zelia, and the other one I worked yesterday with her, and her name is Joyce. And both I met them on Instagram because one was doing a motion capture thing on Instagram, and I talked to her, Zelia, and we worked at a distance, and then she came to the studio. So I just see it as new opportunities and new things, and I'm a bit old side already, so I try not to judge too much how young people take the new normal thing. But yes, I have some means and I can do things, and I try to stay fresh.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I would like to ask my question. It sort of connects to, I think, both questions from Rosa and Scott. So I was wondering, when you mentioned that dancers have their expertise, which is very beneficial for them and gives them kind of the flexibility to also work or feel at home in motion capture. I still wonder, so which aspects of this knowledge that the dancers bring from the physical world might actually be an obstacle when working with motion capture? Like if you are used to relate what you're doing to gravity, or you're used to relate, I don't know, you perceive your other dancers through touch. But these are all elements that are not here anymore or are very different in virtual reality motion capture. So is this something that dancers struggle with and have to relearn? Or what is your experience, how dancers respond to that?
Me? You are saying me?
Yep.
I mean, they dance with gravity. I mean, gravity is not going away when you're under motion capture. I wish it would, but it doesn't. So gravity is still there, and it's something that you share with the people. Like, for instance, in the VRI, that was a very important element that I decided that they were not going to fly and do any anti-gravity stuff, so they could be totally related with the audience. So they were on the same level. So when you mock-up them, you feel the weight of their body because they are feeling gravity. So motion capture is capturing motion. Now dancers, if you say, well, dance in this space, they're going to make something in this space. I mean, they're very clever. They're very good at finding solution, and they're very kind of conceptual. So they know how to kind of make an interpretation and feed all the dots, which is the advantage between a dancer and an artificial intelligence, because an artificial intelligence is like, yes, no, 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 yes, no, no. But the dancer, they can do maybe, perhaps, I don't know, they can fill all those creative gap. So if I mean, they are, I mean, in a way, they are algorithms. So the way I work with dancers, I work with them as if they were algorithm. I give them the rule of the game, and then they play the game, and the game is the game. Then I don't mind if it's more on the left, on the right, because they're just playing the right game. So it's kind of feeded also my practice as a choreographer to understand the world of algorithm. And then I don't think there is anything that is against. On the contrary, I mean, I've seen like Susanna, for instance, during lockdown, she learned Unity, she learned Blender, and she's a natural, in the sense that for her, we realized watching her learning this so quickly that, it's a good conversion, like for a dancer, that would make a reconversion. They're always talking about, what they do next. Well, they could be 3D artists. And I'm sure nobody ever thought that a dancer has pre-skills, to be a 3D artist or to be a mocap engineer, or to work with digitalized movement and to include digitalized movement into a 3D experience. Because, like, for instance, when my collaborators, which I call geeks, when the geeks, they choose a dance section to make a test, they're going to take any dance. They don't care. They don't choose. They took whatever. And I was like, what can't you choose something that is like interesting? Why did you choose the worst example that we have to put in the demo? But Susanna, of course, she will directly go for the good one. So, they bring new skills. I see them more bringing skill into VR. And I'm not even talking about the funding, because I put so much dance funding into the tech that I'm a big tech funder. So, I think dance has been overlooked in terms of what we have done for tech and the performing arts. And we will never get the place that we deserve, I think.
Thanks, Gilles. We've got time for one brief question if someone else has got something they'd like to ask. Or we skip ahead of time, and Daniel, over to you. Thanks so much, Gilles.
I have a question about, who of you have experienced motion capture, and is it something that, and if you haven't, why have you didn't try? Is it because it's too expensive, difficult to access, or maybe that can bring to the next?
Well, Gilles, I have.
And I have as well. Daniel, over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I think is difficult to access. That's a bit of the problem, and we probably all can agree that it's either expensive or technically complicated, and there will be more stuff when we get more access to equipment, and that's quite obvious. But yeah, I think I got to the end. I super precise, even 3 minutes in advance.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for your input.
Yeah, you have a long day. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be in and out because I'm working and we are a little bit stressed out, then I try to join if I can. It's at 5 the end, no?
It's 4 to 5. What was I saying? 20 minutes to 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
UK time. Okay.
Okay, good, great, thanks. So I'm happy to introduce the next presenters, speakers. These are Muriel Romero and Pablo Palacio. They are both founders and directors of the dance company Instituto Stokos. Muriel is a professional dancer and choreographer. Pablo, a professional musician and composer. They have a long track record of very interesting works that combine dance, music, and interactive technology. They are particularly well known for their work that involves movement sonification. So I'm very happy that they can be here in this symposium. So the title of the presentation is Synergies and Algorithmic Connections Between Body Movement, Music and Light. So Pablo and Muriel, you have the microphone.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we have some internet connection issues. We cannot lose the question round with Gilles, but I hope it works. But if because something happens, just tell. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here with, well, in a sense, a bit in a family. No, we were discussing yesterday that this is a symposium, but the actual translation of symposium is a banquet. No, it's the original term for symposium. No, so it's good to share some dishes, like Gilles, and some of our extended collaboration, for example, with Daniel. No, because I was preparing and looking for material for this presentation, and actually we've been collaborating since 2010. No? Which, remembering when we met in Romero in Switzerland, we were developing interactive instruments for people with diverse functionality or handicapped people. And Daniel and I very soon hooked up, and started to exchange data. I was working at that time with a dynamic stochastic synthesis. It's a way of producing sound algorithmically with probability functions and connecting with his simulations of generative simulations of natural phenomena. And Muriel and I, with 2006, looking for these connections between movement and sound. I am a composer, as a choreographer, as Daniel said, but I also put my hands in the mat a little bit, programming and developing instructions and software, able to translate some phenomena. And this has been a relationship that has see. Okay, there we go. This was actually one of the EPs we did in 2010, and it was a piece in which we collaborated with Daniel. Also, it was the first collaboration, and in which we connected body movement, interactive sonification, sound synthesis using random walks, and swarm simulations, which is an abstraction of how group of animals, of agents, they gather together. And this was actually a piece that tour, I would say, was quite successful, even if we didn't take many compromises. And so the basics of this piece was how to connect this way of connecting, of creating sounds using probability functions, which is based on an algorithm called random walk, with swarm simulations, which is one of the architectures Daniel has been developing for many years, I think. And so this was an example of the work we've been developing in the last years, and how then we can connect these abstractions finally in the stage with the body. Okay, so one of the particularities of, for example, of this work is not creating an interactive design that is only reactive, that we can listen to a translation of movement into sound, but also how the stage and the visual and audio components on the stage, they become like dance counterparts. for example. No? So in this brief example, for example, Muriel's stops and the agents simulation, that is a multimodal phenomena, it creates music, it creates visual, visual imagery. When Muriel stops and they create a form. So another work, I think is one work we started creating this project in 2013. And I think it comes a bit to the point because, well, there's a composer that has been very influential for us in Stokos. And actually we take the name Stokos comes from stochastic, which means the target, stokaye in Greek. And it's a musical approach. It was initiated by Yanis Xenakis. And this year is the 100th anniversary of Xenakis. Maybe some of you have attended to the many symposiums also around his extended revolution of music, but also on visual arts. Okay, so this is another collaboration we did with Daniel. It was called Neural Narratives. Well, the title comes from neuroscientist Francisco Varela, and this idea that our nervous system is changing from configurations to other configurations. So we are not the same person, for example, when we are dancing, than when we are like drinking with friends or talking in a symposium. Different configurations, different personalities, that go beyond what we are, and this is kind of musical, this kind of resonation, internal resonance of our body. So this was a kind of inspiration for this piece. Another inspiration is this technique of Yanis Xenakis. It's called arborescences. So it was a way he had of grabbing archetypal forms and translating them into music. These forms are three shapes, the forms of our nervous system, also a lighting bolt, our blood vessels that have these three shapes, and we also use them for reasoning, for creating these three shapes for thinking. Okay, so he normally put these shapes into millimeter paper and then rotate them. So what we did in this piece, in a sense, was making them alive, turning them into life and connecting through a artificial neural simulation that we created to make them alive. The activity of the simulated neurons, etc. And Daniel could explain this much better, but this is just an overview of it. And I'm finally connecting to sound as well, and to the body. So in a sense, so the body is also an arborescence, it's also like a simulated neural system. Allows the dancer to extend the presence, exactly. With the qualities of movement, and also these creatures, these body shapes, they evolve in the same after some movements of Muriel, some recording with a lower scale system that Gilles, the one Gilles has shown, because we use the Kinect. It's a very simple low-tech motion capture system. This is an example. Yeah. So more or less. Have less or more, and they become this kind of body extensions, but also dance counterparts, and also kind of extended musical instruments, no? That they can explore. And on another level of interactions, this is a project we.
Pablo, sorry to interrupt. We're just getting, your internet connection is just it's choking a little bit. So perhaps if you were to turn off your video just to reduce the wear and tear on your bandwidth, it might just help de-stutter that. So we're getting a sense of it, but it's just stuttering a little bit. Sorry to interrupt.
You lost us.
Yeah, we keep losing you for moments. So as Simon suggests, maybe
It stutters, okay. And the voice also is stuttering.
The voice is now fine, yeah.
It's okay now? Can you listen to us?
Yeah, at the moment it's fine.
It's fine,
okay,
but if you, I think it will help if you turn the video, your video off, so we're not seeing, so we can just see the screen and not you as well. I think that might help if that's possible.
Okay. I don't know how to do this. This is in the.
I can do it from here if you like, Pablo and Muriel.
Okay, well, whenever I play a video, maybe. Okay, or okay, as you do, you can feel free to do that. Okay, so this is another piece. It's a kind of different work. It's called Piano and Dancer, and even if it looks as a very innocent title, it kind of tackles very important phenomena in music, in instrumental music, which relates to seeing musical performance, playing an instrument as a sort of choreography. So the idea of this project is it possible for a dancer to play the piano, preserving the movement viscosity, but also musical coherence. Okay, so the piece is based on this connection of movement with the mechanical movements of a piano, of a disc clavier. Okay, and well, let's see. This is a small example. Yes. So one of the challenges was of this project, which was part of an EU project. I see some this project HoloDance, but also another project called Dance in collaboration with Infamous Casa Paganini. There was a focus on movement qualities and how we can translate these expressive aspects of movement, not which movement we do, but how we do it, into music. And this is something that is very kind of straightforward for a musician, because it relates to the articulation of sounds, okay? Like a fluid movement, it's very easy to see it as a fluid sound, like a glissandi. And also this idea of the qualities, for example, fluidity compared to staccato, they have a deeper connection also with aspects of music and dance like predictability. A fluid movement, let's say, is a movement that is kind of predictable, because there is a continuity, there is a kind of logic, there's a causality. While, for example, in staccato, we can jump to any point in the space. There is a kind of surprise, and even there can be also a lack of causality. We can move into randomness once we move into these other qualities. So this is, for example, in this graphic, we see how we connected particular stochastic functions that go in between we have the movement quality extractions, we have then some stochastic distributions, and some other simulations that are between the movement extraction and the final musical result. Okay, as we see in this image. Okay, and so for example, well, this is a kind of transcription, real-time transcription of the movement into musical notes. And top score we see, even if we don't know music or we don't read Western notation, we see. No? So we jump between areas and notes, no? Between continuous notes. Okay. While in the bottom score, we see there is a jump, and also there is a change in the texture. It's like a less fluid movement. This could be like a moment of the performance, a real time. And so there were many qualities we experimented with in this piece. And also we discuss which algorithms, which abstractions would be interesting to finally translate them into sound, to grab these qualities. So these qualities could shape some abstractions that we finally could listen, could see in the movements of the plant. One of these abstractions was the swan simulations that Daniel designed for this piece. And we use them to control, to shape what we call the dynamic symmetry in collaboration with our colleague engineers in Italy. So dynamic symmetry is not the symmetry in the shape. For example, we'll have the two hands in a symmetric relationship. This is symmetry between qualities. So for example, the top part of our body is fluid and the bottom part is staccato. Or it's fluid. So there can be symmetry or there can be not symmetry. Okay. And this in the end would affect the So this is another moment in the piece. As the piece evolves, the interaction gets looser and more complex. There's a moment in the performance in the booking center. Very nice building by Renzo Piano. So as you see in this piece, the piano is also kind of present on stage with the movements, the complexity of this magnificent instrument that is also one of the two essential elements in a dance class. Okay, the dancer and the piano, but in a novel relationship. A follow-up of this piece is what we call the hidden resonances of moving bodies. It's a piece we did with the percussionist of the National Orchestra, the soloist of the National Orchestra of Spain. And we kind of kept exploring these choreographic relationships of instrumental performance, which is very evident in percussion, okay? Especially depending on the percussion instruments. In a sense, percussion is a kind of dance. So after this work and this work with Muriel, that she now plays the piano very well, actually. She could play with, for example, with below the marimba, you see it is the first percussionist of Spain that is under the marimba, is Juan Guillem. He's a very famous percussionist, one of the most amazing musicians that you can think of. And he's Rafa Galvez and Muriel at the piano. Well, and in this piece, there are a lot of situations in which the dancers, they synthesize sound, also the musicians, they play with non-tactile instruments, with stochastic synthesis, there are many things, also written music. And sometimes also the dancers, they transform the spectra of the instruments. Okay. How long, then, how it's in time-wise, because with this
You have
introduction?
6 more minutes, and then we would have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay. Okay. Sí. Okay. So, okay, I will skip this piece. This Recomene is well. This is another piece in which Muriel, she speaks in many languages. It's based on the Alexandrian ideal of cosmopolis. So she reads the Quran. She speaks in Cantonese. She also creates music with some pressure sensitive shoes that are creative. This is an interesting instrument we've been performing with since 2008. 18, okay. And but we will move on to the last performance a little bit. It's actually it's part of Daniel's fellowship. It's called Embodied Machine, and it's a piece we just premiered. I have to say, I don't know if Gilles is still listening, but this was made possible also thanks to Gilles, because we created, we used his mock-up system. We had two very interesting fruitful residencies at this studio, the studios we just showed. This is one of these moments. This is the studio, Gilles' studio before the refurbishment that we showed. And in this piece, there is something particular of how we use the mock-up, I would say. This is something we discussed a lot, among us, with Daniel. Between us, we didn't want to use a mock-up system as a way of translating a human body into an avatar. So in a sense, like the body is not visible, what you perceive is the 3D avatar. So we use the mock-up system to translate the body into other abstractions, into light, into sound. So the stage is kind of an avatar. It's a multimodal avatar that manifests hidden aspects of Muriel's choreographic approaches into light and sound. Okay. So, well, one of the reasons, this is the moment of the rehearsals in which we created, for example, multimodal instruments, with laser rays that would connect with the joints, with the very precise capabilities of the mock-up system. For the dancer, she has these laser strings that she can pull down and up. They become like extension of the body, so a musical instrument. Okay, and one of the ideas, we've had to work on these abstractions with the body. This is to work with robotic lights, with moving lights that could behave in different ways. Sometimes they become like an instrument, and sometimes they become autonomous also. Also thanks to the generative simulations that Daniel designed for this piece. They were based on Muriel's concepts and approaches to dance. And sometimes they follow the dancer. So the dancer is able to what we call painting with light, painting the stage, but also painting the body. But in other moments, the light, they become locked down. They explore the body, and they have their own. It was also part of this simulation approach. Very interesting. And yes, and another strong point of this piece was the costume, because there is these standardized costumes, that we use for mock-up, and they are very practical, but also they are conceived in this way because normally you don't see the dancer. You get the data for research or for whatever reason, and we created a costume the idea of a responsive second skin, also was kind of a living thing in a sense, that would react to light with a very interesting designer. It's called Raquel Buch. She's an architect. And here we see how she treated the markers, how she created like a kind of second skin inspired on the Venus of Ephesus. This Venus, which is full of eggs. The whole body is covered with small eggs that symbolize fertility. This is the site of the piece. And well, this piece is also like a kind of is like kind of a flagship of a lot of research. And one of these research is this cartography of movement. We did a lot of movement recordings in Gilles' studio, and this was organized with movement qualities. Daniel created this documentation where you can see the body, but down you can see the mockup, and also a lot of annotations with Moses, and with Peacemaker, with the motion bank, very interesting tools. And out of this, it was very interesting to organize, to have this repository before we really entered into the final creation phase, because we have all the information, we could really look at it, we could really search it. There are moments in which, for example, in these laser moments, we see Muriel connecting to the lasers, but sometimes you see the lights dancing or informed with the mocap data according to certain qualities. Okay, so yes. There was a lot of work with sonification. For me, it was kind of a challenge also because the previous examples we were using like five IMUs, for example, a reduced number of points. And this mocap, you can have like a cloud of points. That represent the body, you have to organize them.
Sorry to interrupt, Pablo. So just if we at some point to transition pretty quickly into questions. We've got about just over 5 minutes before for questions. So when you're ready.
Okay, so we are done, no? Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, and then this is, for example, this is one of the last examples I would like to show on how the movement is translating into time. Okay, and maybe just this serves as a source for question. This is one of the simulations that Daniel developed for this piece. These are kind of simulated arms based on Muriel's qualities that turn the stage into a dancer. And we see Muriel out of the mock-up zone for the first time in the piece. Okay, so maybe now I stop and I give way to the questions. Sorry for extending too much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Pablo and Muriel, for this presentation. Are there some quick questions?
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm happy to ask one myself, but I feel unjustifiably privileged because I could ask you questions for months and months already.
If nobody has a question else, I could ask one. I think it's hi, Pablo, Muriel. Nice to see you. Sorry we haven't seen each other. It's been crazy, huh?
Yes.
But so this question is to Muriel, I think, because one of Daniel's, you can assess Daniel's Marie Curie Fellowship, because one of his goals was to deepen his understanding of dance practice. And I know then he worked with you for a while in the qualities and the terminology and understand. So would you say that Daniel learned something and could bring that to your collaboration? Did he learn more about the understanding dance practice more deeply?
I think so. I don't know. That's a question for him, not for me. But he created new qualities, movement qualities. I learned a lot from him, actually, from this project, really. It brings me to another level also to understand quality movement, no? And sound and the body. We really, we develop many new connections between all this
Okay.
sound and light and body. Yeah, I really learned.
Okay, thank you. I was just checking.
Okay, please. Good.
Simon, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you both. So this is not a timekeeping question. I was really struck by the title, Embodied Machine, and I guess I was reminded of Gertrude Bodenwiese's work from 1923 called The Demon Machine. And I'm really curious about what you understand. What is it about our fascination, the human fascination with the metaphor of the body as machine? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think one of our approaches, I think the things that we have in our mind, no, when we do this type of work, no, we combine the body and we combine the technology. Is this? There are like two aspects of ourselves, I would say. No, there is like there is a part of us. I think this applies to everybody, that we try to show us like we learn a lot, we are very thoughtful, we are very rational, no? We create devices, we use computers, so we know what we do, the things that we know, and then there is another thing that is the things that we don't know that we know, that they come from the body, and these are also very associated to musical performance and to dance. There is a second nature, it's a kind of unconscious that is very important, and this is like the body. So there are like two ways also to approach dance and to approach music. One is with numbers, with the machine, with technology, being very try to explode this part, that things that we know, and that's the machine in the end, no? It's a type of mechanism, no? It's a kind of causality, a bit like we were explaining with the qualities, no? So these two things, if we try to deny them, in a sense, in a creation of our lives, it's a bit dangerous. So, of course, the word machine has a lot of implications, with the body. It's a kind of antinomia, it's kind of oxymoron. And I think maybe that's why dance and technology is a controversial field, and sometimes festival programmers, they try to create this niche, this kind of ghettos, dance and technology is icon, because it has this kind of mythical idea we are going to be dominated by the machines, or in the end it's going to be the human, preserving his nature. But I think it's a bit like heaven and hell, It's been these two parts of us, Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that was super interesting. Marriage of Heaven and Hell, by the way, is also a piece that Muriel and Pablo did.
With Daniel, he did a very interesting work, turning a speech into natural phenomenon, into fire, but you see also these rational linguistic aspects, and turn into more into bodies.
Okay.
Anna had a hand up. I don't know, Anna, if you wanted to.
I'm not sure.
Simon, you're the timekeeper. What do you think?
I also feel bad because I took some of the time. We've got 2 minutes until the next one.
Okay, we take this question. Please, Anna.
I'm not sure it's a quick question, unfortunately, but thank you, Pablo and Muriel, for the great presentation. It's really fascinating work, but I'm wondering about the audience perspective and the way that the extent to which you enable the audience to understand the complexity of the processes that generate what they see on stage, whether it's important to understand the processes to see the work, or whether it isn't.
Espera, I didn't chat. We didn't listen to the question.
We can hear you now, but you missed the question.
I can save it for the later discussion if that is better for time.
I think, Daniel, I don't feel like being boss here.
Let's try to place the question here, and then maybe we can elaborate during discussion. But I think it would be great to have a brief moment for discussion.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I will listen now.
Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you want me to say it again, or are we moving on?
Okay, so actually we think, we don't think it has to understand the process.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question that many people say to ask us. No, we don't, I don't know, we like to keep this magic in theater, you know, we are making theater in there, we are making performance, yeah, and we don't want to show all the technical.
It's a real shame not to have it interrupted, but maybe the interruption is a good time, Daniel, to move on. Sorry, Pablo and Muriel, we're having troubles with your connection.
Now it's fine. Eh? Yeah, now it's fine. Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know.
Sorry, we apologize. We apologize. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe move on, and we hope we have some time, if you are here with us during the discussion, to address this question.
Yeah, we are here.
It's a very interesting question. Yes, yes.
Very interesting question.
Yes. So I think it's better if it's not necessary, no? Because then it's very important to have an experience when you see a piece, no? And then maybe you can investigate, but this is something that is we think a lot about.
Well, but yeah, we are interested in to show somehow a magic thing, no? Like, I mean, to don't show all the technical. Yeah, some secret. Have to have a secret.
So thanks a lot. I will be cruel and move on. Okay, thanks for your input, Pablo and Muriel. The next speaker is Ruth Gibson. Ruth is an associate professor at C-DaRE, and together with Bruno Martelli, she's part of the Gibson-Martelli art duo. Ruth is a dancer and choreographer, and she has embraced working with new media. So Ruth and Bruno, they have created a very diverse list of pieces, very interesting pieces that all share a common thread or a common interest of Ruth, and the title is an indication, the title of her talk is an indication of this interest, which is investigating kinesthetic awareness through performance technologies. So Ruth, you have the audience's ears.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to the presenters as well, and everyone who's there. It's really nice to see some faces from quite a long time ago. You too. Thank you for your presentation. I'm in a very hot Airbnb in Venice, and currently Bruno is over on one of the islands in Venice doing a motion capture live VR performance with audiences. So it's interesting that Gilles came and then you came. And so anyway, it's great company. I will just share my screen and you can say whether it's good or bad. Let's see. Hang on. How's that?
That looks good.
Okay, great. If there's any problems with sound, phone me up. I possibly, because I'm working on a really tiny computer, it seems very, very, very tricky. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we do together. Some of the presentation will be notes. Some of it might be a bit quiet and allow you to just have a look at some of the stuff, and hopefully not for too long. So yes, and then I'll be more discursive a bit later on. So to begin with, our engagement with digital technologies disrupts, augments, and interferes uncannily with our co-presence in virtual and real space, causing us to reassess our perceptions of space, time, and place constantly. Some audiences are pivoting towards transformation and introspection, looking for grounding and reorientation in a fast-paced world. Learning about yourself and how you do this is something that I'm increasingly interested in, and how this in turn can change behavioral patterns, engaging with others and different environments. Reflecting on my practice proposes a way of describing the special attention given to experience. I named this kinesphere, defining it as a methodological, sorry, so difficult with a dry mouth, hang on. Methodological frame that gives audiences immersive encounters using a variety of techniques, including game engine visualizations, motion capture, haptic interfaces, and stereo projections. Emerging are specific considerations paid to dance performance, interactive design, programming, camera, and image aesthetics to convey principles, imagery, and purposes from and relating to the Skinner releasing dance technique and pedagogy. To build artworks that offer exploration and hands-on engagement on behalf of the audience requires sophisticated programming and understanding of movement. This movement knowledge base arises out of iterative studio practice. The studio practice begins with motifs and themes recurrent in our work. These are interrogated, tested in the lab. Characteristics that shape the kinesphere follow a pattern which starts with practical kinesthetic information brought to light by dance investigations. As virtual production tools become ubiquitous, sophisticated and accessible, this idea has been concrete and actuate in digital performance. Issues surrounding fidelity and efficiency, challenges such as lag, latency, patience, pausing, anticipation, caution, waiting, readiness, capturing, tracking, copying, and awareness. The notion of the double is also a potent concept in performance. In dance and technology works, we witness ideas of the double being played out. The digital double, self and other, doppelganger, double as reflection, puppet, mirror, duplicate, twin, guardian, chaperone, shadowed self. Mikey Bleeker speaks of corporeal literacy in the theatre practices where communication happens through several sensory modalities at once. Arscott writes of double consciousness and also of the double gaze. I have written about ideas of double presencing before and also notions of out-of-body embodiment when writing more thoroughly about the kinesphere, but let us move on. The next will be several diagrams of interfaces, designs, and corresponding video examples of works where no biped appears, but where the figure is the audience. The audience can explore and navigate landscapes. The concepts and visuals of these works are drawn from historical and environmental issues and also events. But the mechanics imbued in the key principles of the pedagogy of Jane Skinner's releasing technique is imbued and embodied in this work. From now on, I will call this SRT. For example, principles of weight and buoyancy, imagery of mist are embedded into the interface design and also the graphic representation. Neuroscientist Alan Berthels experimented on Russian cosmonauts to answer these questions. How does weightlessness affect motion? How are motion and three-dimensional space perceived? He describes how human beings on Earth perceive and control bodily movement. In his book, The Brain Sense of Movement, he argues for a rethinking of traditional separation between action and perception, and for the division of perception into 5 senses. In Berthels's view, perception and cognition are inherently predictive, functioning to allow us to anticipate the consequences of current or potential actions. The brain acts as a simulator that is constantly inventing models to project onto a changing world, models that are corrected by steady, minute feedback from the world. We move in the direction we are looking and anticipate the trajectory of a falling ball. We recover when we stumble and continually update our own physical position, all thanks to this sense of movement. This interpretation of perception and action allows Berthels to focus on physiological phenomena largely ignored in standard texts, proprioception and kinesthesis, and the mechanisms that maintain balance and coordination of actions and basic perceptual and memory processes involved in navigation. So these works that I'm showing you are very much about perception and action, which actually Berthels sort of controversially calls perception, but whatever. I will show you some more. So I could go on forever with that, as Simon knows, because he's looked at that video before, and it's very, very long and contemplative, and also, you know, you can interact with it the way you want to. So here's the first setup of how we would have these haptic interfaces of a yacht wheel and ropes. And there's this idea, really, instead of this coming to an abrupt stop, we wanted to put into the interfaces some idea of inertia, and also basically to pause rather than to stop. So this was something that was, something that we really wanted to do. And particularly in the next project, which of course was in the really early days of the second wave of virtual reality. So we'd have a rope so that people could actually support themselves while they were looking from the balloon journey, and navigate either, you know, north, south, east and west, either pulling, ascending or descending, and left and right. And Joan Skinner never talks about left and right. She talks about east and west, and she never talks about up and down. She talks about ascending and descending. So these things are often from the dance world and from my learning and my experience, I tried to imbue in the interface design. So next, onto VR works, slightly different VR works, continuing relationships with technology and SRT. I began creating drawings in virtual reality with Quill software and holding the controllers on my feet. And so I was making different kinesthetic rituals from daily practice from Joan Skinner, actually drawing in space, in virtual reality space. And then these drawings that look very much like tumbleweed or brains were then made into a superstructure environment for audiences to explore. And this was what the art clip. present might see this as my backdrop sometimes when I do Zoom calls. So the VR system here can be conceptualized as a variety of motion capture systems, really, and drawing with each of the foot sort of animates the individual vertices, basically undulating the movement, giving it a kind of organic feel. So occasionally these very straight lines that I never dream I would do in Quill software with my feet, would throw me back from the volume into the space, and I'd have these shooting lines, but then they'd wobble. So there's this extraordinary, there's a little tumbleweed brain there. So for time, I'll move on to a lovely project which I did with a very good friend of mine, Susan Cazell. And again, you wouldn't think this is particularly a VR project, but it was an extraordinary one and probably less obvious. It consists of a book of a lot of numbers, which is all mocap data listed from the head to the toes. And it's a 30-second dance phrase. And so my 30-second dance phrase is the book, and Susan's is the reel-to-reel. And we converted the phrase from the book from text to speech on the reel-to-reel. And we were very interested in this idea of the digital as ephemeral. And we thought that the book, the reel-to-reel and tape would last long. And then what we did is we encrypted our data, and then we made gestures in VR, and then we cast those in bronze. And also bronze may last a long time. So there was this conceptual idea. These gestures, when done properly, like mine was the circle one, if it was done properly, then you would unlock the encrypted gesture. So it came around at the same time as Cambridge Analytica. So it was really quite extraordinary at the TEI conference. So there you have my encrypted data, which I think is actually great. And there is, if you use the gesture, you can unlock the data. So it was a nice project. And on to Dazzle, Reassembly of Bodies, which we're doing here in Venice. This that you're seeing now is Emily, Alicia, and Axel doing Semaphore, which is a naval signaling system, which is the alphabet. And I love it because it's a non-verbal communication, just like dance. So we've used it choreographically. So each of the dancers can give instructions such as jump, turn, run, leap, and those kinds of things. But also this one is just saying dazzle now to everybody on the island to say that the performance is about to start. So that's it. And then the Dazzle Semaphore was used in the Interact-ML project, which I worked with colleagues at Goldsmiths, who I hope we'll invite for a C-DaRE invites at some point. And we basically were doing the semaphore and thought, hang on, this is a really, really good idea to work with machine learning, because the points are very precise, because often dance moves are quite ambiguous. And so we felt like, if you had like a low gesture and a high gesture, it could fill in the in-between. And the whole idea of the Interact-ML project was to be able to use a gesture instead of coding or doing hard coding. And and the semaphore has these discrete positions and the system can pick it up really quickly. And of course, the dancers were very funny because they said, I wish you'd have had this, I wish you'd have mocapped us doing this, before, because we could have learned the semaphore from the system. So it was all sort of interestingly back to front, and they learned from video footage and also from the signaling system. So saving to hard code, and we're refining as we're going. You don't have to have spatial values for your environment, because also that can be sorted. So what we're doing here in Venice is actually we're using gesture recognition for the dancers to actually change the scene in the mocap and in the VR and so on. So it's been really great to do that. Let's see where I am. Aha. Okay, nearly there.
We've got a couple of minutes, Ruth, just to give you a sense of that.
Can I squeeze an extra bit because of those extra questions? Let's have a look. I've got two things I think I'd like to say. So yeah, I read this really interesting thing by Anna Griffin recently called Embodied Creativity. It's online, and it's was written in 2021, I think. And she said creativity exists not only in the cognitive domain, but within the physical domain as well. Embodied creativity also makes room to articulate the complexities of the somatic. So, and she's got lots to say about that. And I just wanted to finish on this. Bodies are not neutral, they are inscribed by experiences. So that harks to the kinesphere. But what's really interesting to me here, and I don't know whether any of you have seen any of these before, I may have shown some people in the Zoom call, is that one of these is derived from motion capture data and one isn't. And it's really, for me, it's so lovely to see this. So I have a little quote from two of my heroes to just end with. And Joan Skinner died last year at the age of 97. And to her, all movement was dance. All movement. And it's one of the main principles of her pedagogy that she calls the dance of life. And then another hero of mine died this year who's James Lovelock, who you might know, who's an independent scientist, environmentalist and futurist, and inventor of the Gaia hypothesis. And he died at the age of 103, phenomenal chap. And he was always really provocative. And he spoke of artificial life as being a life, which I thought was pretty good. So all the consciousness of AI and so on is, I'll leave it there, or I'll leave it with the sheep running away. A glitch in the physics, which is extraordinary.
Thanks so much, Ruth. So we've got time for a couple of questions. So any takers?
And drops off the world. Bye. Oh, Anton's there. Hi, Anton.
Scott?
Oh, just a quick one. I think Daniel's got one too. You mentioned the terminology from Joan, the east-west and the descending, ascending. Just to what extent did your team, the people you work with, you would have shared that terminology with them, I think, probably. Or I'm guessing.
Well, totally, it was brilliant. Well, whenever I do a project, I always make them do a Skinner release class. And so, yeah, woe betide if you want to collaborate, because it's a dance technique for all. And it's an improvisational technique. So you can either do lots or nothing. In fact, you can lie on the floor for the whole time if you want to. So it's like, it's not, so your question's a great one though, because actually when we were in Christie Digital, when we were in the cave, we got so lost in the world that we had to put northeast, south, and west, and of course it was height map data from Svalbard anyway in the Arctic. So it was actually a way of finding ourselves in the world as well when we were working. So yeah, it's a lovely question.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Just a brief question. I'm very curious about the first pieces you showed. So, and the role of the interfaces, the navigation pieces, I would call them. So, when you work with interfaces, I mean, interfaces are loaded, I guess, with cultural norms. They have to also adopt certain bodily norms. So, how are you playing with these two aspects? And of course, if you move into the digital, then in principle, you could throw away all these norms, but usually you don't, because otherwise you lose sort of the understandability at the very least of the interface.
I think I'm about to have a think about that question. I was sort of taken by something Pablo said. It was like he said, because obviously it's very different, their work's very different because it's very for the stage, and yeah, I'm getting drawn back to the stage, which is really, really strange. But he said something about, he didn't say unwittingly. I'm quite interested in people understanding their body unwittingly. Like, I think he said, what did he say, unconscious? Like this sort of unconscious knowing from somebody, you know, watching the work or get something from it in that way. And I was really, really interested in that. And I think the interfaces at the time, we as a team, we were really concerned about, I suppose, really looking at Joan, what, you know, these it's quite interesting because it's actually really hard to code, like the inertia in the ropes and so on. And of course, when you do a live show, often if you do it in public art space, often the public just want to break it, you know. So there's that element as well. So you have to, it's really, and health and safety and all these things and all the body storming you have to do, literally coming to the gallery and actually engaging all the time in it, so that these things are A, health and safety, but B, for all. So, you know, so there is the touch. There's very much about the touch, you know, the ropes, the touch, the wheels, the, you know, and we are very, I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but we really try and slow, you can tell the pace, we try and slow things down. So there's a squeeze to things. You know, it's something that Joan talked about, soft, supple feet. And there's like a squeeze to things rather than going hard at it. It's very much about preservation of physicality and muscles and tissues and so on. But I don't know that I answered your question, Daniel. Maybe it's a longer conversation. Yeah, longer conversation. Thank you.
I think Daniel, with you, I think this is a good time to just have a quick little toilet break. We'll I don't know about you, but I'm busting. So maybe if we took no more than 5 minutes, so I got 14:53 here, so just before 5 o'clock, and we'll kick back off with
Let's
Anton.
ask Anton. He will be next. Is that fine with you? Okay, good. Okay, 5 minutes of toilet break or whatever break.
Great.
Anton, can I say hello, please? Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you again. I regret being so late. So
no,
I
it's
missed
cool. It's
half of
fine.
it.
It's just nice. Everyone else is having a break, but I can say hello to you because I have to go off performances now. So I'm going to miss you all.
Okay. Now you're leaving.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, exciting. I mean, but is there any documentation of your performance?
Yeah, just send me an email.
Actually, I wanted to go to Venice, but later on. So
that's my call now. I've got to go.
Yeah. So then
I will send the documentation. Yeah, because it's live makeup and VR and stuff, and yeah.
Okay, that's difficult. I know.
All right. Bye.
Okay.
Bye,
Good luck.
Bye,
good luck
Simon.
to you.
Good luck.
Bye, Daniel. Daniel's all gone. They've all gone to the loo. All the best with the rest of it. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
Lily. Bye.
It's just going to be me, Anton. No one's going to come back. They've heard that you're
okay. Well, that's fine.
They've heard that it's you, and we're off.
I'll just ramble on into the void, you know.
It's not a void. There's at least 3 of us here.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it will be recorded, you're rambling for eternity.
Yes, you'll void ramble.
As I usually do.
It looks like some people are coming back. And
you are returning. That's good.
So literally walking into the symposium.
Yes.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining in the middle of your, I heard you are building your roof.
Yeah, we're getting a roof, like, so for the last
well, it's about time,
3.5
before
weeks.
later.
Yeah, I think so too, exactly.
So,
but the builders are gone, so it should be, there should be no disturbance.
Yep. Okay, no things falling down on your head.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so I think I introduced you. I'm really, really happy that you were able to join, and I look forward to your presentation. So, Anton Koch, I call you lead developer at Motion Bank. I don't know whether that's the official term.
I was the first full-time employed one, so that makes me the lead, I guess.
Exactly. So, yeah. So you specialize in dance digitization and documentation through linked data approaches. And you are the main developer behind the backend of the popular Motion Bank application Peacemaker and Moses. So the title of your presentation is Data Modeling in Contemporary Dance Digitization. So
yes,
the audience is yours.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I don't have any slides, and my structure is wobbly, but I guess it's reflecting the bottom-up approach that we're taking to dance digitization anyway, so should be fine. And yeah, so I want to mainly talk about the challenges that the practice of data modeling in the context of contemporary dance poses, because I mean, I think the first fundamental challenge is in reconciling the two terms digitization and dance, whereas digitization can be understood as just translating information into numbers, whereas the term dance, and especially contemporary dance, opens up a vast and ambiguous and and very crazy field that is, that you could think as very much directly opposed to this strictly numeric, quantifiable approach of usual data modeling that you encounter. So, but in general, before you start maybe digitizing dance, maybe thought of as, in our case, documenting dance. So I mean, it's not really the dance that you're digitizing, it is information about the dance or contained within the dance, or even if you think bigger, then you're actually trying to capture the conceptual framework that enables a potential of dance to be realized in some form at some point in time. And in that space, there's plenty of different types of data that you can capture. There's plenty of different purposes for capturing specific data. And I think in the beginning, we have to really sit down and think about what types of data, what technologies for data collection are needed basically for this specific task. So it's really a difference if you're, for example, doing like live mocap to some kind of visual or auditory translation versus documenting a contemporary dance piece from its inception to its completion for later, basically being transmitted to other people for maybe for taking it back up years later, like long-term documentation versus just short-term scratch, basically. And yeah, and for this, there are lots of different technologies out there. So I mean, some of you already work with motion capture, and motion capture seems to be one very obvious choice of data collection technology, but in the end also very serves only a fraction of a fraction of potential purposes, like how you can use it within a documentation or a digitization project, because in the end it is only producing numeric or quantifiable recordings of the traces that the dancers left within as some spatial some space, basically. And this gives you only basically the end result, as the same with video, for example, which is, I think, the most predominant format to document dance nowadays, is just to put a camera on it. And the camera also only gives you a trace, like traces of light on a sensor over time. So it's also a very superficial way of documenting that specific dance. And it might be okay for some purposes, but if you want to convey deeper information contained within that dance or being behind it or what have you, then you basically need more than just quantifiable data. So it's more than just sensor readings of things that happened when someone executed some choreography, but rather you want to bring qualitative data into the mix. So, and qualitative data for me is something that that basically introduces some more ambiguity, is something that in our case is mostly text-based. So it's a lexical approach of sticking metadata to certain points in time in a video recording, for example. So there you can see in this frame or over this period of time, something is happening, and that something refers to some deeper context, makes references to some other artwork. So it can also be, I don't know, like it could be the information that this movement originated from this series of drawings that was created within that session, and so forth and so forth. And once you bring in these qualitative data points, basically, or data artifacts, then you end up in the end with a huge bunch of disparate files, basically, or disparate objects, in a way, digital objects. So that can be like text snippets, commentary from the choreographer, from dancers, from people outside the whole thing. It can be video recordings that have happened in certain points at certain points in time during rehearsal, like transcripts, whatnot. So and at Motion Bank we basically decided at some point that there's no use in trying to find like a generalizing data scheme or like some unifying model that could fit all purposes of possible digitization efforts. And so basically we say, okay, you gather these artifacts, but at the same time you basically keep the relationships between these objects. So one thing that this linked data approach enables is that you can always establish a subject predicate object relationship between two nodes in a network. So you can say, like, this photo depicts dancer X, and this video depicts dancer Y, and so this, in the very, very simple sense, establishes a semantic relation between two digital objects. And this is something that is, I mean, it's kind of like the semantic web, I think, is from the early millennium, and it's basically an extension of the hypertext format of the World Wide Web. And the Semantic Web project basically came into the picture under a rather, I think a pretty stupid premise of basically creating a digital map of the world and then making the world accessible to machines through building digital ontologies that explain what a thing is and how it relates to something. And obviously this coming from a consortium basically of old white men that basically are appropriating the practice of naming things, claiming things, and then putting this all under the umbrella of the commercial World Wide Web. So, but I don't want to, I could ramble on about this for quite some time, but let me go back to the benefit of that system, because as with basically every technology, there's multiple ways to use it. And I think particularly in this context, the semantic web has a lot of benefits, because you could say that that every piece or every choreographer's body of work represents their own world in their own right, basically. So you could say that that there are some sort of ontologies in play, like maybe I have to distinguish that from the ontologies that Anna is going to talk about later, but I really just mean vocabularies, like terminology, specific meanings, attributions of things that come up within an artist's work or creative process. And so you could basically design a linked data network that is consistent for a hyperlocal application within a single piece, or to extension to a body of work or a school of thinking or something, but really keep it in that hyperlocal context. So not to go out and say, like, I'm going to create the great dance ontology that will fit on all kinds of works and will be used to document every piece from now on, but really just say, okay, I can use this really for this particular instance now. And then it gives you the benefit that you could basically devise tools to navigate this referential network of objects. And I think in this process, you are then enabled to basically make additional assumptions. So there's the process of gathering data in the beginning, then establishing this whole body of very simple connections between objects, and then later on basically traverse these objects through their semantic connections to make additional assumptions. And these assumptions can then also coexist with contradicting assumptions or something, but they always add layers on top of the data, while still retaining the historical origin or the development of this body of data. And now I just lost my train of thought, I think. Sorry, I should have prepared something. But yeah, anyway, but you see that this basically would be something where you don't make any assumptions in the beginning as to what you're expecting to find there, but you're really rather gathering something that has a relevance to the data or to the dance that is happening there. So, for example, it doesn't make sense to have a hyper detailed motion capture with 1 million joints per skeleton if you're looking at a group of 30 people just orienting in space, you know, and you need a bigger picture. So you always choose separate separate forms or separate means of documentation, and then you put them in context, and then you use them in the context that makes sense to you. And if you're if you're then basically fleshing out these relationships or making more and more connections within that set of data, then then I think there's the possibility of a data model emerging from this, but not just something where you define a model and then you try to squeeze the stuff into the model, but you start with unstructured data and then you move towards a data model. And that is something that that is enabled very well by this tech. And one upside as well is something that all these objects, these digital objects describing this, are basically plain text. So they are kind of transparent. You can read them in a text editor, and this also enables you to basically, maybe have more of a chance of a long time archival, because it's not tied to proprietary formats, to opaque formats where you don't know what's happening without some specification that gets lost in the process or something. So it's always good to stay lexical there. If that's the approach that you favor. I mean, again, I must say this is only one way of doing it. It's kind of how we do it at Motion Bank, but I'm sure there are thousands of other approaches to this. So, I don't know, what does the time say? Am I?
You've got plenty of time. You've got at least 5 minutes, but if you wanted a bit more, you could pay me something and I'll give you a little bit more.
I don't know.
I also want some of
Do
your
you
money.
take crypto?
In case you no longer know
Bitcoin
what to
only.
say, maybe you can talk a little bit about how Peacemaker or Moses, how this approach affects these two tools.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Peacemaker and Moses are tools that are essential to us to, both for data collection, basically, because we work with time-based formats like video files, or, for example, it could also be a motion capture file, but like the Peacemaker concept is you take a video file and then you start annotating on certain points in time on that video file. And so this way you add more dimensions basically to the somewhat hermetic format of video. You make it also indexable and searchable. And that in turn enables you to use Moses, which is another tool that has been, it's not very well developed, but it came basically as a package with the launch of the Motion Bank project, which enables you to draw from your annotations and create presentations basically from that. And so it enables you to place the video and some annotations alongside and use filters on the annotations to point out certain things, and also add additional material, images, and then you basically publish this as a self-contained mini website that that then ideally makes the data or gives you some kind of tour through the data. I mean, you can basically take the same body of data and then have 10 people point out things in that data, and there will be 10 different tableaus showing you different stories or different insights into that. And you can then in turn use this to further annotate the material or create more layers. So it's basically kind of the input-output tools for Motion Bank. I mean, for this approach, I must say the approach is fundamentally about annotation. So it's always annotating some time-based media with some other media, and then even the scores, like these Moses results are annotations in space. So basically you just annotate a rectangle on a surface with a video, or you annotate it with an image, and by proximity you create relations. as to in Peacemaker you create relations through time, basically. So the server seems down. That's not good. But I'm on vacation. I don't care. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I would like to basically open this up to questions, because I think I could ramble on about lots of things there, but it's more about what's interesting to you, or what we should talk about.
Okay, great. So
in case there are any questions.
I hope so. I have one, but
sure.
I'll wait a moment for maybe somebody else to be the first. Or maybe I'm the first. So my question is, I find I heard your presentation, or these thoughts a few times, so I'm fairly familiar, and I find it also fairly convincing, especially the approach of kind of using a tool that was meant to kind of conquer the whole world as a lens on micro worlds that choreographers build or dancers build, or that only exists during a single piece, for instance. But what I'm not sure I understand how the semantic web approach can help is with ambiguity. So if there is contradictions in what dancers think about certain aspects of the piece, or so how, these connections are connections, they are simply there. You can't say this connection is maybe a connection. So
well, that can all be contested, I guess. It's kind of the ambiguity, I think, is something that would result from multiple positions on this being collected within the same referential network. There are very simple cases where I can say this image contains a photo of you, and you say no, it doesn't, and well, a third person maybe can can give an opinion if that's true or not. So, but there could be like more subtle ambiguities, or something that that is really interesting to find. To find basically in the cracks within statement A and statement B. So and I think the ambiguity I would cherish here is the thing that basically that happens on the internet, kind of in a bad way a lot, with like alternate facts and whatever. But I think also, again, in these micro worlds, it can be a very interesting thing to study them. There can be a totally different perception from one person in the project to the perception of another person, and for a machine to navigate this ambiguity, that's kind of, I don't know, like I cannot talk about how this would make it more or less machine readable, but I think for a scholar it can be very interesting to move around in that ambiguous space, if that answers your question to some extent.
To some extent, yes.
I know. That's a lot of this is also kind of, I think, subject to if you're moderating these things, or like how ambiguous this ambiguity gets, basically. This is in the end, it's always like it's always a community effort to document this data. And I think in very narrow scenarios there is no ambiguity coming up, but I guess over time, I don't know, there can be things piling up, that can be interesting to navigate.
Okay, Scott. Yes.
I remember, this reminds me of Sarah Aloui from Paris one time. I think she wrote a paper, observed Laban notators, because sometimes Laban notation is one of the first things somebody who's not familiar with dance practice might think, oh, that's great, it's a formal system. We can use Laban notation because it's a symbol-based formal system, and that's going to help us translate dance into other forms. But she as part of, I think, a study, sat and listened to a handful of labo notators, experienced, trained people, argue incessantly over the, whether or not, what drawings to use, what labo notation symbols to use for the, and I think that space of argument is what you're also trying to talk about somehow, this space of disagreement, because it doesn't resolve into, but you're trying to somehow embed that, I mean, in these machine processes that do rely on the quantitative, the computational dimension, but that's just, it seems like you're trying to encourage the imagination to engage with, as you said a few times, more ambiguity, and I could say more argument, more disagreement. So it's just a comment, really, Anton. That's less.
Yeah. I think that also reminded me that I think one important thing also that I always try to keep in mind is this saying by Whitehead that you should not confuse the map with the territory, and what we're doing here in digitization is creating maps. So I mean, what we at Motion Bank are doing is creating maps of conceptual territory or conceptual space or whatever, like how you want to frame that. But and maps are allowed to be off or to be wrong, and I mean, they are not, basically, if the road is not where the road is actually, then you're getting in trouble. But like, I mean, this is always only just approximating and kind of like trying to get closer to what's happening there, or what the dance is, if that's even like a sensible question. But yeah, so ambiguity is good. It's great. Like embrace the uncertainty.
May I? I have a superly overly general question about the relationship between quantitative and qualitative. And what I keep thinking about when it comes to machine learning is this famous word-to-vector thingy, where you translate words into numbers, essentially, and then you derive whether these words are semantically related to each other based on how similar these vectors are. But there is some way for computers to take in qualitative information, turn it into quantitative information, to then again make statements that are about qualitative things.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
is this something that has any meaning whatsoever for looking at that?
I'd say that might have meaning. I think it's like, and that's the good thing. I mean, it's really not something that you could say in general, or like, but I think, if you're basically, if you're writing your comparison algorithms there, then you're designing that. You're basically, if you can kind of express similarity or how your vectors are constructed, basically, I mean, apart from just spatial or like semantic vectors that are maybe linguistic or something, then I think it's totally valid, because if you stick to your kind of hyperlocal world system there, then I think you can very well design algorithms that work within that. That probably won't work outside, but that give you some kind of interesting layer to play with, and even like in an artistic sense, if you establish the topology of your creative processes, then you could basically make generative algorithms that generate creative processes for you or something, or give you some guidance within your local field. Like, yeah, I think anything goes, really.
So how are we on time, Simon?
We are painfully on time, and
Fully on time. What a joy for Swiss people.
I feel so proud of myself. But yeah, it was probably time for one more question, and then Anna's in the hot seat.
No one?
No, perfectly clear, no questions whatsoever. We know exactly what to do now.
Totally,
There
right?
are no problems. There are no problems.
It's like okay, well, yeah, then thanks again for having me. And yeah, I'm trying to stick around as long as possible. I won't make it for the discussion, unfortunately, but I'll at least listen to Anna's presentation now.
And if people are interested in some of those links when the server's up next week, when Anton's back at work, access.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Anton. So next in the line is Anna Pakes. Hello, Anna.
Hi.
So Anna is a senior honorary research fellow at the University of Roehampton. She is a philosopher and also has a background as dancer. Her research focuses on the ontology of dance and, among others, also on the relationship between these ontologies and computational representations of dance. So the title of the presentation is Ontologies of Dance in Digital Worlds. Okay, Anna, please go ahead.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm going to try and show some slides. So hopefully you can see the slides now, but you can't see the slides yet. You see the slides now?
Not yet.
Unless the slide has a live video feed of you on it.
No, unfortunately. Hang on, let me try again. There, you could see it, but I wanted presenter view rather than. Does that work?
No, it doesn't seem to. You are able to see the share screen on your computer, yeah. Anna.
Ah, here we go.
That's it.
That works. Great. Yeah. So the first thing to say is that I feel a bit like an interloper in this symposium, largely because I'm not directly involved currently with creative uses of various kinds of digital dance practice. In fact, the more presentations I listen to, the more I feel like an outsider who looks on with interest at the different things going on in these worlds. And with a certain curiosity sharpened by my involvement in analytic philosophy and analytic philosophy of dance in particular. So what I want to try and think about is whether these different kinds of digital and computational practice have ontological implications, focusing particularly on dance that involves AI and VR, although I may not get that far in the presentation, and thinking about whether those practices affect how we think about the products of dance practice. Sorry, I'm manipulating my screen here, and you can still see my slides, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So my first task, I think, is to clarify what I understand by the term ontology, which is a fairly slippery term, as Anton's already indicated, which has various meanings in philosophy, performance, and computer studies. I think I also want to explain why I think that dance works already present an ontological puzzle even before we address contemporary technological innovations. And one aspect of this puzzle is perhaps best explained by reflecting on a concrete dance encounter. So tonight I'm going to Sadler's Wells Theatre in Islington in London to see Anne-Theresa de Keersmacher's solo Goldberg Variations. What I'll see is an event with a specific location in time and space, and it will involve a particular configuration of movement and sound, a configuration which is distinct from the movement and sound of other performance events, including other dances set to Bach's Goldberg Variations. Tonight's performance will also be different in various respects from yesterday's show, even though both of them involve de Keersmacher's solo dancing to Bach's music. But then, of course, tonight's performance is also, in another sense, the same as yesterday's. They're both performances of the same work. And in seeing either event, I'll also be seeing the dance that is De Keersmacher's Goldberg Variations. Indeed, that title applies not just to tonight's event, but to another kind of thing, a work or a dance that's manifest in, but not identical to the event. So dance works materialize in ephemeral performance events, at least if we think of conventional dance works. They seem to depend on moving bodies for their realization, but they can often be performed by other dancers, and they can materialize at different times and or in different spaces. So dance works don't seem to be physical things. They're not events, they're not tangible artifacts that you can pick up, move around or misplace. And yet they don't seem to be entirely abstract either, given that they can be created and perhaps also destroyed. So we can interact with them causally in a way that's not possible with many other abstract objects. So it seems easy enough to say what kind of thing tonight's performance is. It's an event which takes place at a particular location and unfolds through time. But explaining what the dance work is more tricky. Now, from an analytic philosophical perspective, an ontology is an attempt to account for the nature of the things involved or produced in a given domain. So it's a branch of metaphysical inquiry rather than conceptual analysis. It's not about defining what counts as dance or art, for example, by giving necessary and sufficient conditions for something to fall under those concepts. It's more about questioning what kinds of things dances are, understanding the word things in the widest possible sense, alongside the other kinds of things that the world contains. Recent past research of mine has focused on the nature of dance works in more conventional performance contexts. So I've tried to explain what dance works are, exploring whether they are events, structures, abstract objects, mere collections of actions or performances or something else. Are they social constructions? Are they real or fictional objects? Do dances in fact belong to just one ontological category or to many? So those are the sorts of questions that are addressed in an ontological investigation of dance work, as I understand it. So even in more conventional contexts, it's quite hard to explain what a dance work is. There's a range of competing ontologies between which it's difficult to adjudicate. And I wonder whether thinking about digitally generated or digitally enhanced dance provides additional support for one or other of those ontologies, or maybe whether it's going to further explode the field, for example, by revealing a radical break between contemporary and historical practice, that kind of break that would require an ontological revolution as well as an aesthetic one. Now, one standard way to account for what dance works are is to say that they are types of which there can be many possible tokens. So works could be considered types of performance event, distinguished from one another or individuated by the movement or action that they encode or prescribe. When a group of dancers performs or tokens the movement or action associated with a given dance, they perform or token the work. For example, Steve Paxton's Satisfying Lover is individuated by the movement structure that's outlined in his verbal score for the work, and that consists of dancers intermittently walking from the right to the left of a space, pausing at specific moments to stand or sit still for a few seconds. When the dancers enact this structure, they perform the work. But it seems like at least movement structures like this one could materialize in contexts where they wouldn't count as performances of a given work. So the same pattern of walks that Paxton prescribes might occur in non-dance contexts too, like in situations where people queue to register for something, for example. Or there might be another choreographer who is ignorant of Paxton but hits upon the same movement, expressing something different through it because she's working in a very different context. So Paxton's work, we could say, is expressive of ideas embedded in the context of American postmodernism. It takes a fresh look at movement possibility and at the interest of the apparently mundane. It encourages the viewer to grasp the complex functionality of walking and also to appreciate the individual ways in which each person performs what seems like a very common movement. A contemporary choreographer designing the same structure would be saying something different. It would probably feel less original, given that pedestrian movement is very prevalent in dance today. Perhaps the new work would be more political or differently political. For example, the audience might now be encouraged to question rather than celebrate the universality of the act of walking, reflecting on the exclusions that operate in the suggestion that it's something that everyone can do. So whatever the global interpretation, the movement structure's aesthetic properties will be different when devised in a different context. And that suggests that the work or dance can't just be the movement structure, because its aesthetic and other properties change from one situation to the next. It's an issue addressed in Gerald Levinson's influential ontology of musical works, where he points out the non-identity of works which nonetheless have identical sound structures. So Levinson argues that works are individuated not just by their sound structures, or perhaps in our case by movement or action structure, but also by genetic factors, so by whom and against what art historical backdrop the work was made. So according to Levinson's view, a work gets its meaning and produces its effects on us, not simply in virtue of its abstract perceptible form, but in virtue of its status as a statement, expression, or utterance arising in or emerging from a singular generative context. So this is a contextualist rather than a structuralist ontology. It's not merely the aesthetic surface of the work that makes it what it is, but its context of genesis and the fact that it's being developed by a given agent at a given moment. So already perhaps we can see a challenge that some kinds of digitally generated or enhanced choreography might pose to this idea of the dance work. In some contemporary practice, the task of devising choreography, developing a movement structure, is delegated to an AI, which has been trained on a range of data sets and which generates movement possibilities on the basis of that training. So the issue arises of whether what's then produced has or can have the same status as a more conventional work. Is it still a product of intentional creative agency? Is it still a statement, expression, or utterance arising out of a singular generative context? If we think it is, we need to explain how, and if not, we need to either reject the idea that what the AI produces is a work, or reject a Levinson-style ontology in favor of a different view, which places emphasis elsewhere. So I'm going to talk through some fairly mainstream examples, which perhaps help to sort of sharpen intuitions or test intuitions on these things. The first is Pontus Lidberg's work Centaur, made in 2020, in collaboration with the AI artist Cecilia Wagner-Falkenström, who programmed an AI trained on a variety of different data sets, including sensor tracking of dancers' performances, planetary movements, and Greek tragedies. So the AI participates in the performance here as a disembodied voice, giving the dancers live instructions about what to do next. Lidberg points out that the voice is a single interface, but with many modules behind it, and the possible movement sequences and possible solutions to compositional challenges also thereby expand. So swarm intelligence is used to enable interaction between the dancers, while reinforcement learning enables algorithms to adjust composition in real time in respect of goals like maintaining symmetry or asymmetry, balancing the number of dancers on stage, and avoiding collisions. The publicity for the work claims that the final result is something entirely new that neither the choreographer nor the artificial intelligence algorithm could have anticipated. So there's a challenge on at least two levels here. Is the AI exhibiting intentional agency in creating? And how much is the utterance of the human choreographer shaped by the collaboration with the AI? Now, the theme of this work is the interaction between human and machine, and the anxieties provoked by ceding agency to an algorithm or artificial intelligence. But of course, the role played by the AI is determined by the human artists involved, not just the choreographer, but the installation artists, software developers, and coders. They select the data sets and devise the algorithms, which then proceed to function more autonomously, but within a frame crafted to explore certain questions or express particular affects. So it still seems to be a work on the model just examined, not just a movement structure, but one developed within a singular generative context that shapes the meanings that the work has. Engagement with the AI shapes the intentions of the artists involved, just as the data sets on which it's trained determine the movement it prescribes. And understanding those contexts in turn, I think, in turn impacts the audience's perception and grasp of the aesthetic significance of what transpires on stage. I think something similar is true of Wayne McGregor's Living Archive project in association with Google Arts and Culture Lab. So the AI here is trained on 25 years of McGregor's choreographic work on video and programmed to offer multiple options for how to continue or develop movement sequences. Dancers and choreographers select from these options, and McGregor comments on how the collaboration makes available unexpected combinations that can look very different from existing movement sequences developed in older choreography. But though the process produces aesthetic surprises, and it's less clear that it's radical ontologically, given the evaluative control of outcomes retained by human artists working within a particular context. So knowledge of how the movement is generated plays into its interpretation. McGregor talks about the work's themes, including the question of who can make choreography and how. And arguably those questions are only raised because of the way the movement is generated through the human-AI interaction. Now, maybe there's a more radical possibility here than either of these projects offer, where the human artist is removed from the situation, allowing still further autonomy to the AI, perhaps in the evaluation as well as the generation of movement. Here too, though, it still seems that it wouldn't be the movement structure in isolation that would matter to appreciation, but the movement structure as a product of certain procedures and contexts. So the training data sets, the design and structure of the AI would shape the meaning of what it produces. The genesis, as well as the structure, would still matter to interpretation. So even if we've expanded understanding of who or what can make an artistic utterance, a contextualist ontology still seems to me to be relevant. Now, one of the features of these projects, alongside many other digital dance projects, is that they generate other kinds of outcomes than live performances realized by human dancers. The same is true, of course, of some non-digital dance projects, for example, where a screen dance work is made as well as a theatrical version of the same thing, or perhaps where an installation outlives its activation by a company of dancers. But it seems like digital and generative practices are more likely to proliferate outcomes of different kinds, perhaps because they're typically highly collaborative. So the different kinds of artists involved could produce different kinds of things from mutual inspiration, or perhaps because the datafication of choreography lends itself to a variety of possible uses or types of visualization. So the Living Archive project includes this video installation by the artist Ben Cullen Williams, which is shown on an LED screen as a backdrop to the live dance event. It offers abstract visualizations of AI-generated choreography developed on the basis of the archival data. The images move through a spectrum from the very abstract to humanoid figures, and they could also be seen on a website which allows viewers to alter some of the parameters of each visualization. And then there's also an online experimental tool that enables any user to create their own dance by selecting poses from the archive, which are then linked together in a moving stick figure sequence. Or the user can strike a pose for their webcam, and the closest matches in the archive are then identified. I think this poses a further challenge from an ontological perspective. So the presence of such varied outcomes puts pressure on the idea of a token through which the dance type is manifest. So recall that if a dance work is a type, it needs to be tokened for the work to materialize. The type itself is abstract and can't be directly perceived. So the question is, do these other outcomes also make the type perceptible alongside or as substitutes for performances? Can they count as tokens of the respective dance work types? Now, in both of the examples I've just mentioned, schematic representations of dancer movement are developed through motion tracking of video materials and motion capture from live dancers. These are processes for abstract movement to shape line and points in space, which abstractions can then be recontextualized and recombined. So the process reveals movement structure in a certain sense, although it may be that other aspects of danced action get occluded as a result: volume, weight, momentum, texture, and so on, not so visible, at least in these visualizations. But maybe, at least for some dance practice, such visualizations make manifest movement structure or parts of that structure, which constitutes a dance work. And again, there are different ways you could go in relation to these issues. You could think about these new manifestations as tokens that are equivalent in status to performances. That would challenge the ontology of the dance work as a type of performance event, since it then also seems to be a type of digital visual manifestation. And it's hard to explain how a single type could be both. Or you could argue that these manifestations are not tokens of the dance work type, but other embodiments of the structure. So maybe there's a difference to be emphasized between being generated by the structure and tokening the structure. The philosopher Guy Rohrbach makes a distinction between a work's occurrences and its embodiments as part of a wider critique of a type ontology for art forms that produce multiples, like music, dance, and photography. So Rohrbach argues that works are temporal phenomena. They come into being at a particular moment in time and will cease to exist at some point. But they're also temporally flexible, so subject, and I quote, in principle to change in their properties over time. Type theories that posit structural features as essential to work identity struggle to allow for change. New occurrences that differ in structural features would seem by definition to be different types. Now, rather than being structures, Rohrbach thinks that works are particulars, so they're historical individuals or continuants. So they're not physical objects, but higher level objects that depend on their physical embodiments. Embodiments are concrete things which ground facts about what the artwork is like. And a subset of those embodiments are its occurrences, which display the qualities of the work of art and are relevant to appreciation and criticism. They pick out, says Rohrbach, what we care about from the historical flow which sustains the objects. In other words, they distill the aesthetic properties on which appreciation of the work focuses. So, for example, in photography, prints are occurrences. The negative is an embodiment, not an occurrence. In dance, Rohrbach says, performances are occurrences, whereas film records, scores, and other memory traces are embodiments. Now, Rohrbach only mentions dance very briefly, and he seems to have as his model conventional practice where theatrical performance remains the focus. But in line with that ontology, one could think of outcomes like Cullen Williams's video installation as either embodiments or as new occurrences of the work which display certain of its qualities and present a focus for appreciation in their own right. But Rohrbach's view has its problems, not least in fleshing out what draws different embodiments together as elements of the same continuant or work, and also in understanding what distinguishes occurrences and embodiments, if not their realization of some kind of structure. There's also another possibility, which is perhaps a more plausible way to think of outcomes like Cullen Williams' video, that it's neither a token of the dance work type nor an embodiment of it, but a new work in a different medium, related through its genesis and inspiration to McGregor's wider Living Archive project. I'm aware of time and only having a couple more minutes, so I'm going to try and sort of speed through a few more ideas before opening this to question. I think one of the interesting questions raised by the platform that's part of the Living Archive project, which allows you to create your own dance sequences from poses stored in the archive, is the question of whether dance structures, dance work structures, movement structures, or action structures could be tokened by the user or the receiver or the person who would traditionally have been in the position of the audience member rather than the dancer in the professional sense. Again, that seems to me to put pressure on the idea of the token. It raises the question of how and by whom tokens can be generated, under what conditions. I don't think that's something that's particular to digitally enhanced or generated dance practice. For example, I think it's a kind of question or a set of premises that's also present in Forsyth's choreographic objects. So in fact of the matter, there's a series of gymnastic rings hanging from the ceiling through which visitors are supposed to make their way across the space. Forsyth claims that the object is not so much there to be seen as to be used, and an engagement with the object offers the user a possible reassessment of their mass, strength, and coordination skill as a unified system. So the work still offers a movement structure in the possible trajectories that the different rings provide, and it's the audience that must activate the structure and make it visible by climbing into the work. Same seems to be true of various kinds of dance experiments involving VR. I looked particularly in preparing for this presentation at two rather contrasting uses of VR. I would rather be talking about Ruth Gibson's much more interesting uses of VR, but nonetheless. So Centaur has a VR extension, which essentially is a three-dimensional film that puts the audience member in the midst of the dancers, and you can then change your perspective on where they're moving in the space. It's not interactive in the sense that what you do as a viewer doesn't affect what's going on for the dancers, but it does put you in a more kind of agential position where you feel like you have some control over at least how the content is accessed. And the VR work Dust by Boleslavsky and Judova with choreographer Patricia Akenwa does seem to be more participatory in the sense that it tries to activate the kinesthetic senses of the experiencer to a much greater degree, and also to activate their kinesthetic imagination in trying to imagine that they can float around the dancers as though they are dust particles, and they can experience their physical bodies disintegrating as they fly freely around the space. Again, the interactor here doesn't alter the structure of the work as such. There's no live interaction between the VR experiencer and the dancer, whose presence is again recorded. But ontologically speaking, perhaps we could say that the dance work remains a structure of movement or action, but here for the audience as well as the designated dancers to token or enact. I'm interested also in this question of interactivity and the way in which you can sort of parse it in terms of different degrees. So Dominic Lopez, the philosopher, has a famous paper on the ontology of interactive art, where he draws the distinction between weak and strong interactivity. So in weak interactivity, you can select the order of or the perspective on a given content, whereas in strong interactivity, your choices actually determine the nature of the thing. He uses the example of a website with hyperlinks contrasted with a game, including video games, where the user's decision-making actually shapes the sequence of states that the user goes through in experiencing the game. Interestingly, Lopez thinks that the ontology of strongly interactive works can also be related to a type token ontology. So strongly interactive works are types whose tokens are produced by our interaction with them. But he moves away from the idea of a structure as the individuating feature of works and towards the idea that it's actually the algorithm, the global algorithm governing the entirety of the game that individuates these things. The algorithm, he says, just is the function that maps any one state of an interaction instance onto the next state, given the interactor's gesture and the sequence of previous states. Thus, two interaction instances are correct instances of one work, provided they are correctly generated by the same algorithm. And that provides perhaps a fruitful way of thinking about dance works more generally, decentering structures of movement and action and focusing instead on the algorithm. So the set of principles or procedures which govern how the dancers, including audience members, move from one state to another, given the agential choices of the person in question. And I think I have run out of time, in fact, gone over time.
You have run out of time.
Could have more to say, but I will leave it there, and perhaps I can sort of draw things to a conclusion in response to questions, if there are any.
Thanks, Anna. So we've got 5 minutes of questions, or at least 5 minutes for questions. Thank you, Anna.
So I might, Scott actually raised his hand. You go first, Scott.
Andy, please, you go first. I've been asked the question every time. Go ahead.
So, and I always take forever to form questions. So I don't know if it's like quite question-esque yet, but because my master's thesis also looked at digital technologies, more so in archivals, but the ontologies of digital technologies and how performance kind of transfers or relates or doesn't relate in aspects and instances. And I was thinking about these concepts of the kind of like external generations that performances might have. And as I struggled writing about some of this myself with how we might stream something on internet platform like YouTube, and then there's suddenly other pieces or items that come after that. So you have both like a post artifact video that continues to stay on the platform, as well as things like post artifact comments that act as sorts of ephemera that respond and reply, but also continue to build and generate meaning after the performance has happened. And so I guess some of the things that I'm trying to think about is if these are the kind of same things like Robart's concept of different, like an aspect of something in a different medium, or is it technically still a similar or the same medium because it still was created in this video space, and then how that might change conceptually over time as things get added to the piece, right? So as people are continually commenting or interacting with a performance in the online space, and there's continually generating new and different content to relate or comment on, does that piece continue to change and grow with that? Does it, or is it decontextualized from commentary? Is it decontextualized from these like kind of external ephemeral concepts? Which, all is to say, I don't think there's a question there, but I'm still trying to form it.
Well, I mean, I think it's exactly, as you know well, it's exactly the kind of questions that ontology struggles with, is that the set of relations that pertain between these various objects that seem to be involved in some way with the same thing. But also the question of whether it's even possible for a work to change, and how, depending on the ontology that you argue for or prefer, that is more or less possible. So a kind of strict type ontology says a work can't change. If you have a different occurrence of a different structure, it's necessarily a different work. And that's precisely the dilemma that somebody like Rohrbach is trying to deal with by saying, well, actually, that means we need to move away from that kind of view in order to think more of a work as something that's temporally flexible. So, I mean, I don't think there's really these are really tricky questions. And I think it's one of the difficulties in kind of working in this area, something I became increasingly aware of while preparing this presentation, is that a lot of ontology of dance materials, including work by me, has focused very much on kind of conventional theatrical performance works, and hasn't really addressed the challenges that various kinds of digital dance practice pose to that model. Having said that, there is a lot of work currently in the ontology of video games and the ontology of digital art more broadly, which is applicable in this sphere, but still need some kind of working out in terms of how the specificities of the dance domain relate to those more general claims about different types of digital work. So, I mean, I guess what this is trying to do is just sort of point to directions in which I'd like to go in order to investigate these things further. It feels quite unsatisfactory because it always feels very preliminary, but hopefully by kind of starting somewhere and then focusing on one of these issues, we might be able to make some more progress. And also by hearing the kind of intuitive responses of people listening, whether this is to work out whether the very idea of the work still has any purchase in this domain. And I guess that's another kind of overriding global question that I have about this material.
We've really got time for one more question.
Scott's put his question in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this is just a thought to follow up on. It was really thought-provoking. Thank you. I'm aware of some studies that have looked at audiences, and you asked an audience question earlier to Pablo and Muriel about what audiences need to know. Well, what do you think that, what you asked them what they thought the audience would know? Of a study looking at audiences who've been invited, like a number, like 600 or so people as a case study, who've been invited to view AI art that's been created with an AI by a human and creating with an AI, but they've been fed different language to couch their experience in. And if they've been fed the idea that the AI has agency somehow by referring to an agent versus a tool. And what they discovered in the study is that the tendency was then, if they saw the AI as having agency, then they might attribute, they tended to attribute ownership of the artwork to the AI versus the person. And I was listening to thinking, what can ontology do to help us unpack, like in an applied sense, kind of unpack this space to make these kinds of distinctions and maybe better understand, or if you think it could have that kind of applied use in this space particularly with AI, I think, as a evolving technology.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that it can have a kind of practical application in that sense, in that at least it kind of crystallizes our view of what might be going on in that situation. So that, I mean, what you've just described sounds fascinating, but I do think it relates to things that I was trying to talk about in relation to how the generative context plays into the interpretation of the structure. And arguably that makes it a different structure, a different type of thing, depending on where it's come from. Partly because the way that the aesthetic properties then fall out, and by turn, the interpretation of the work is affected by where we think the thing has come from. And I think as speaking from the point of view now as an audience member, it really matters to me to know how something has been produced, because it's then that I can get a handle on where this might be going and why it might be interesting. Now, there might be limits to that, in that I don't want everything. I don't want to know everything about how it's produced. I want to retain some of the magic, as Pablo and Muriel were talking about. But at the same time, having a kind of steer about what might be going on here artistically seems to be crucial to understanding the kind of significance or value of that.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting.
I never quite thought I feel like I'm a party pooper stopping conversations. That's actually time, Daniel, but I see Pablo has his hand up, so I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to move on to Fumiya, or do you want to
well, let's ask Fumiya how he's with his time. Hi, Fumiya. Would you survive having to wait 2 more minutes or so?
No problem.
Okay, good, great, thanks a lot. Okay, so then we can take Pablo's question.
You're muted.
Turn on your microphone, please, Pablo.
Well, sorry, I am stepping in and out due to the connection, but I am sorry, I'm losing part of the things. But I would like to say something for this very nice presentation, and also some of the things related probably are connected to Anton's, because it's true that every time, and also Scott, like connected to what Muriel said, I mean, on what are the supposed foundations of the piece, no? What is going on a technical level that could explain the piece, no? Because I mean, technology is a very slippery field, no? Very complex field, no? Because yes, I have the feeling that sometimes things fake in a sense, no? So when we talk about these connections, no, and these representations, these intentionalities, no, that you mentioned, no, with the tokens, in order to generate this ontology, is it the possibility that there is not an intentionality, and there is not, and that this, for example, does the audience need to know what is all these layers that we explain about in order to experience the work? That in a way operates a transformation in art, no? So, I mean, maybe I was just throwing a lot of things, no? But I didn't want to escape the opportunity, no? To just, you know. Okay, that was it.
Just sort of really quickly, I think, no, I don't think there's any sort of pre-given set of things that the audience needs to know, but undoubtedly somebody engaging with a work like Centaur, who understands more than I do about the algorithms and the tools that the artificial intelligence is drawing on, is able to appreciate it from a different point of view. So there are again kind of degrees and types of process that might influence the way in which the work appears. In respect of intentionality, actually, I kind of convinced myself while preparing this that, in fact, I had no problem with the idea of an AI creating a work, that there didn't need to be intentional agency in the sense of a human agent there. Partly because the kind of ontology of the work seemed to sort of survive the absence of that in the way I was thinking about it. But I think perhaps that's a bigger discussion that needs to be given more time in its own space.
Okay, so thank you very much, Anna. Yeah, I hope we have a little bit of time for this bigger discussion afterwards. Hi, Fumiya. It's great that you are here. Thanks a lot for joining us. So yeah, I'm very happy to introduce the last speaker of this symposium. His name is Fumiya Iida. He's professor of robotics at the Cambridge University Department of Engineering. He's a strong proponent of embodied and bio-inspired approaches in artificial intelligence. And among others, he organizes the Embodied AI workshop series, which I personally find super interesting. So the title of his presentation is On the Timescales of Embodied Intelligence for Creativity. Okay, Fumiya, you can go ahead.
I think I have a bit of problem over here. Let me just share it once again. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So let me try to, I just switched to a new computer yesterday, and I still have a lot of problems with the applications and so on. But hopefully you can see my screen right now. Is it all good? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for invitation to this symposium. And I'm probably the biggest outsider of the symposium, but hopefully we can share some common views. At least we can do some discussions afterwards. So my area of expertise is the so-called bio-inspired robotics. So what we do is basically cross-section between biology and robotics and trying to learn from nature how we can improve the technologies based on what we know about the nature. But at the same time, we also want to apply some engineering methodologies to understand the biology side. So today, what I'm going to talk about is what I know as an engineer about how we can understand the biological system from engineering point of view. But at the same time, what we can do is very, very limited in terms of building robots similar to biological systems. And in fact, I'm very, very jealous with all of the speakers today that you have a very interesting subject, which is the human dancers and choreographers and singers and so on, which is very, very interesting, exciting, and at the same time, very complex entities compared to what we can do with the technologies, with the robotics technologies in particular. So, but at the same time, I think robotics can give you a bit of insight into who we are, what we do, and how we can understand who we are. And that's the kind of point of view I want to discuss with you in my presentation. So just to give you a bit of my perspective about humans. So this is a slide borrowed from Professor John Gardner. He's the Nobel Prize laureate in Cambridge, and he is a molecular biologist, very famous one. But he talks about one of the most interesting aspects of biology and most interesting aspects of human is actually this slide, that our life start with a single cell and we grow through our life, right? So before we're born, our single cell becomes about 10 to the 10 cells. And then as soon as we go out from mother's body, then we still grow about 1,000 times. It becomes a complete adult. And even if we become adult, we replace our cells, millions of cells actually every minute. So by the time I end my presentation, I'm a completely different person, just as a joke. But then I think that this dynamic nature of our body and our life is actually the driving force of our creativity and our general capabilities of all these different things we do survival in nature. And if we want to understand this complex embodiments, so to speak, people tend to go down to the idea of what brain does, because that is a very small part of our body. But at the same time, that gives a significant influence the way how we survive. Or some other scientists look at some genetic aspects, like every single cell in our body has the exact same genetic information, which is a very good starting point to understand what's actually going on in our body. But at the same time, this brain, what brain does or what genome does, is actually a very small part of our embodiment. And what we want to understand from robotics point of view is not only about what brain does and what the genome does, but we want to understand the whole embodiment, the whole physical entity of our body, do things in order to make ourselves survival and creative and do all the things necessary for our survival. So as a roboticist, we really, really want to understand how all these things work. But on the other hand, this is just way too complex for engineers to handle. So what we do actually is a very minimalistic approach. What the minimum thing we could do to have an understanding of a big landscape of our biological nature. So my research has actually started to look at brain, but actually thinking about brain without investigating brain, meaning that they just want to build robots that has no brain so that we understand how much we can do without brain. So one of our research topics was actually locomotion robots that has no brain. So all these videos I'm showing is kind of old videos like 20 years ago. But all of these robots has no brain, meaning that there's no sensors and no computational power in this system. But all these robots actually does do the oscillation of part of the body back and forth without really any control or any computation. So just by having very a simple oscillation, how many different kind of things we can do is a kind of interesting things. And as you can see, the dog robot on top left-hand side, this robot is able to turn right and turn left and sometimes go faster, sometimes go slower. All of these things happen without brains, right? And it's almost as if it's dancing, but all of these things happen only because the body is there. So one of the things we can learn from this kind of things is that actually it's impossible to switch off for human brains, but we can actually build the robots without brains so that we can actually investigate how body can do so many different kind of things in the real world. So one of the interesting things that we investigated in the last 10, 20 years is actually the role of energy or energy constraint in addition to the brain computation. So if you look at the biological systems at large, many of our activities and our actions are constrained by energetic input. So we usually have a lot of energy in daily life of humans, but if you look at nature, there are lots of animals behaviors are constrained by the fact that they don't have enough energy. So how we can make our body and our activities without energy input. So one way to make a very energy efficient behavior is the use of this self-excited vibration. So if you know a little bit of mechanical engineering, we all know that every mechanical structure has its own resonance frequency to show very big vibration. And of course, this principle can be exploited by robots, but also it's known that the humans and other animals can make use of this kind of phenomena in the real world, and we explore this, how this kind of principle, very simple principle, but that can constrain our way of activities of a robot. So of course, I don't want to bore you with all this theory, but the self-excited vibration is known in the theory of vibration based on mass and spring. And as soon as you have a mass and spring, you can see a very large amplitude at a certain frequency is determined by mass and the spring constant. But this is very simple theory, but this is actually a very powerful principle that can apply to many different kind of things to understand what the creativity can be. So what we have explored is how far we can go with this simple idea of self-excited vibration. And the first step we did is basically we explored the different spring shape. In this case, we have an elastic being bent in the curve. And then this simple structure can already exhibit the two different kind of behaviors. One of them is a rotation behavior, and another one is the lateral extension behavior. And this kind of behavior diversity is a really starting point of how embodiment can give us the interesting patterns of behaviors. And I asked the students, I got actually many students, okay, how many different kind of things we can do based on the simple principles. And then some students got really mad that they started thinking about, okay, how we can make use of this principle to achieve different kind of behaviors. And in fact, students can be very creative and think of so many different ways, even though they have a very limited capacity of energy supply as well as the programmability of this robot. So basically one motor rotating around, that's what they can do. They can change the speed of motor, but what they can do is basically changing the morphology, changing the body shape in order to achieve different kind of robots. So this is a really interesting starting point because the students can be very, very creative, building a different kind of robots, and just by using simple principle, rotating motor with the change of the shape of elastic body, then they can actually do quite many different kind of locomotion behavior, and that can be understood as a kind of most primitive way of programming behaviors, even without brain, even without much energy, and that's a kind of proto activities for the creative interactions in the environment. So this is the kind of starting point of our exploration 20 years ago. But of course, we haven't really thought of how the system and the environment interact with each other. So all these animals, all these robots, simple robots have no brain, therefore they're not able to interact with the environment. But still, interaction with the environment is a very important source of behavior diversity and creativity. So we thought of how we can extend this kind of research for system-environment interaction. And this is the kind of metaphor we learned from the frame of reference problem in Simon Sanj. And the Simon Papard has an idea of looking at the trajectory of ants. Usually they look like a very, very complex trajectory you can see on the ground. But at the same time, the complexity of the trajectory of ant is actually not the complexity of ant itself, but the ant is interacting the complex environment. And in such a case, even if the mechanism of ant is very simple, the trajectory can be very complex. So actually the importance of system environment interaction has to be explored in order to understand what the creativity of embodied systems. So one of the inspirations we got is from this research done by Professor George Lauder at Harvard University about this dead fish experiment. So this is the fish, biological fish, which is swimming underwater. And this is a sweetwater fish, so that they are very good at swimming against the water flow. But the surprising fact of this experiment is that this fish is actually dead, so they have no brain activities, no muscle activities, because they are anesthetized by a lot of chemicals. But still, this dead fish can swim really nicely against the water flow once it goes back to the water flow, right? So the trick of this fish swimming really nicely is because this fish is actually put in the complex vortices underwater. So in this case, there's a column in the water that can generate lots of vortices in complex environment, so to speak, and the body of the fish can actually take advantage of this complex environment, absorbing the energy from the vortices to behave in a very complex, dynamic, and also a beautiful way. And that's something really we need to think about, how we can take advantage of this kind of idea for building our robots. So what we thought of, given this ideas from biologists, is that so-called the folding paper problem, right? If you have a piece of paper, how can we make this paper intelligent as this dead fish? And what we started to do with the experiment with the paper is that we just, appear a small piece of paper and then see what this small piece of paper can do. And of course, we can come up with all many different ways, infinity variation of the paper piece. And sometimes we can make it something like a small ball. Sometimes we can the rectangular or the square and rectangular, longer rectangular, or we can have some slit in the paper, a piece of paper. And all of these things can actually behave very interestingly. And I hope, I really recommend you try to do this experiment, because it's really, really fascinating experiment anyone can do instantly. So what I can show you in this kind of experiment is that if you adhere a piece of paper, they can actually dance in a very beautiful way. As long as we know, physicists know, there are 6 different ways actually to behave to categorize the falling patterns of the paper. So in this particular case, we constrain the paper into the disc shape, and once we have a disc shape, you can actually change the diameter of this, and then we can actually predict what kind of different kind of behaviors you can do. Most of the cases, you see a lot of chaotic behavior. You cannot really predict how it falls down. But in some particular cases, you can show that they have some steady falling behavior, just going down in a very steady flow. Sometimes we can do the tumbling behavior. It's going down for sometimes straightforward, but then it changes, flipping the direction, and so on and so forth. So this is a really interesting starting point, how simple embodiment can interact with the highly complex environment, in this case, which is airflow in the environment. So that's a kind of one way to understand the role of embodiment in complex behaviors. So a little more experiment we did, complexity introduced in this experiment, is that we can actually do a bit more constraints in the design of the paper. So in this case, we explored the V-shaped paper that has the design parameters of the length of the wing as well as the width of the wing, and then we can actually make many different design of this paper. But then, just by changing this wing length and width of the wing, this paper can behave in a very interesting, beautiful way. Sometimes it falls down like a leaf, and sometimes it falls down like a helicopter. And all of these things are actually very complex interaction between the dynamics of paper as well as the airflow. It's also possible to program the behavior of this by changing the shape of the paper. So we actually analyzed how all this paper can actually fall down in different ways. And it's not just showing one pattern of behavior at the same at once, but you can actually switch between the patterns, which is almost like one step closer to the dancing behaviors of animals and humans. And that's something we're really excited about, because even without brain, even without any muscles or any sensors, we can actually have a very complex patterns of behavior if we think of the careful design of a morphology as well as interaction with the interesting environment. So I just want to go down to the final part of my presentation. So what we have thought of is a really exploration of mechanical designs in one way or the other. And that has been a really, really exciting research we have been doing. But of course, this is not enough to think about some more scalable complexity of human behaviors or human creativity. And what we are really trying to scale up from here onto the next step is really about how we can think of the different kind of embodiment across different time scales. And that is one of the real challenges that we are discussing at the moment in our laboratory. So what we mean by time scale is that if we look at our human embodiment, what makes us moving or behaving in a particular way, and the reason behind it is not a single reason, right? It's not about just a shape of paper, it's not about the shape of the body, but it involves a lot of different kind of physical processes involved in it. So what we have discussed so far is a mechanical behavior that is similar to something like honeybee's wings, or drumming of the musicians, or some walking or manipulation behaviors that we actually rely on lots of mechanical dynamics. But of course, we need to think about what the brain does, what chemicals, hormonal interaction processes we have in our body. But on top of that, we have a cultural and language interaction in the community, as well as all the genetic aspects involved in it. And what's really, really exciting about the embodied intelligence is that the embodiment is the kind of interface between all these different kind of processes involved in the physical dynamics. And this is something we really need to think about in the next step in robotics research. And that's why we're just trying to go out, not only about mechanical intelligence, but also something more about the informational and other type of information processing involved in this the creativity research. So what we are really discussing in our research lab is how we can get the information processes and the physical processes interacting to each other. So a lot of people, a lot of talks today talk about, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning and computer simulation, computer graphics, which is all the information processes you can actually expose to the art physical interactions in the real world. And we're talking about the same thing in the genetic level, right? So it's about the same thing, but what's really important is how information processes and the physical processes have to interact to each other, influence to each other to make something new out of this. And this is something humans can easily do, but the robots cannot really do. So that's why we're just thinking about how we can introduce technology to achieve something like that. And for this purpose, we thought of something like a mother robots that can interface between information world, genetic world, and also physical world. And that's what we have been working on in the last 10 or 20 years. So the mother robot I'm showing here is just a robotic arm that is able to construct things by using some manipulation techniques. And this robot is actually making this robotic arm is a mother robot. And the mother robot is constructing a child robot, right? So this cubes that you can see here is actually the child that is going to be constructed and born to be tested in the real world in a few moments. So now the child robot is now tested in a testing arena so that the mother robot can actually evaluate what child robot can do. But of course, mother robot has no idea what kind of thing the child robot's to do. So that is really the trial and error heuristic process that we have to do. But this is a really interesting thing because mother robots make use of a genetic information to make a child robot. But then the mother robots try and figure out how the genetic information and actual embodiment can relate it to each other. So this robot can actually make robots, child robots 24/7 non-stop. And we can make a lot of different kind of child robots and see how child robots can behave. So in this case, a mother robot is assessing how far the robot can move, which is a simple way to assess the behavior of child robots. But then we can do a lot of iterations and until how the child robots can evolve over time. So this is a physical evolutionary robotics project we did about 6 or 7 years ago. And this mother robot created 500 different mechanical designs of child robots and see what kind of behaviors can emerge from this kind of experiment. So just give you some examples here. So most of the robots are really, child robots are really small like this, so just wobbling around on the ground. But as the evolutionary process goes forward, the mother robot can create all this more complex robots. Like this is a 5-cube robot that can do more complex locomotion robots like this. And the important fact here is that all of these robots are actually designed by mother robots, right? What we as a human did is basically providing some basic materials as a cube, but the mother robot did a lot of trial and errors to create what kind of behavior comes out, and in the end, the robot can actually create something really interesting patterns of behavior. And obviously, there are lots of useless and nonsense child robots created in the process because the mother robot does a lot of trial and errors. So there are lots of unsuccessful child robots over here. But on the other hand, because of this heuristic approach, the robot is mother robots can create some really interesting solutions of the child robots. So what we found,
excuse me, sorry to interrupt you. Just a minute now, if that's possible for you.
Yeah, I'm finishing it in a minute. Yes, all right. So what we are showing here is really what robots can create without the minimum intervention by human input. So what we found really interesting is that a mother robot can actually develop something really non-traditional robots. So most of the robots we build is actually a lot of periodic behavior like this, but the mother robot can create some very non-periodic, steady behavior, which is very difficult for humans to design because we don't really know why this robot is moving in the first place, but somehow this robot is moving by itself because the robot is doing a heuristic search through the trial and errors process. Okay, so anyway, I just want to come to my conclusion here. So my basic contribution for this symposium is that I just wanted to have a bit of discussion about whether robots can actually dance or choreograph or be creative at all, right? So in my opinion, there are lots of dancing robots in movies and medias and so on, but these robots are not really dancing in our understanding. They are not really creative. They just doing what they are programmed to do. So this is not real sense of dancing, and that's something I really want to have a discussion on. If the robots need to be creative, we really need a new way of designing robots, what we call this design for emergence. This is not really trivial problems, and our robots are just way too simple compared to humans and other animals to be creative enough. So that's really something I just wanted to discuss with. So our body complexity, today's robots' body complexity is really, really simple compared to humans. Of course, robots are more complex than our babies, but what robots can do after growth for humans is something not really comparable. So that's something I just want to as a final comment, and this is the challenge of robotics at the moment, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fumiya.
So Daniel, just to let you know, so we're basically got 20 minutes of conversation. So how you want it, whether you want to have time.
Glide immediately into the conversation, I guess.
Yes, depending on, yes, exactly. Yeah. That's up to you. But
and maybe the conversation can start with some of the inputs we just got now. So yeah, so the point of the conversation, just as a brief introduction, is it should be open, so audience members are very, very welcome to ask questions.
Scott's got his hand up. Would you like to?
I just thought I could maybe link with a question that might provide a link to some of the previous ones. Fumiya, thank you so much for the talk. I know your work from, because I've been at some of those conferences, Embodied Intelligence, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. And I'm going to think about your last graph there with the curves, the exponential curve going up on the one side there, I guess, with the a bit with the human and your question. Because some of the earlier presentations, I think, drew attention to what dancers know. So what dancers know through training, through practice. It's one of Daniel's aims with this whole Marie Curie was to deepen his understanding of that knowledge and that. And others here have reflected on that. So this was one of the things that I thought sort of linked things. And I wonder if it doesn't present a kind of question that's almost more an ethical question having to do with developing, the robot that eventually, in other words, to achieve that in terms of your graph, what would be there would be complications of an ethical nature that would have something to do with making a distinction between what people know and what robots can achieve. Do you have any thoughts on that? Any comment?
Well, I think ethical question is always there, you know, whatever we do is responsible in our human society. So that's something we need to think about. And well, in my view, today's robotics research is still very, very far away from in terms of creativity, in terms of, you know, all this artistic behaviors and artistic performances and so on. So what robots doing is very, very simple. But if you look at, for example, what AI can do, right? AI is not a robot. AI has usually no embodiment. They have a very, very limited access to the real world compared to humans and human artists. And that's why, but at the same time, AIs can do very complex things in their own ways. And of course, that gives really interesting discussions. Okay, what AI actually understand what the art is in a way how we define art, right? But of course, you know, they have no ideas about art because they don't have embodiment, because they don't have access to the perception of the real world, real physical world, just like ourselves. So that's why they do art in their own ways, and this is different from what we do as a human, right? Human art is, in my view, is this way because we have this embodiment. So that's something we really need to think about it. And is this is the human art is the only art we should think about, or do we actually accept art in a way how AI understands, right? And is there any other different kinds of AI, the different kinds of arts do we want to accept or not? I think that's probably some more constructive discussion we need to have in this kind of context, right?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll leave it.
So maybe I just volunteer myself forward to ask a question. I'm curious about two things. First of all, the role of trial and error. So, of course, in many approaches where a robot or also something software-based is supposed to innovate or come up with something new, it goes through a process of trial and error. So I wonder what's the relevance of trial and error in the human artistic domain? So how much trial and error is really important when creating works, and even more importantly, how do you know through trial and error that you have achieved something that is interesting? So how do you see that robotics might tell us something about using trial and error as part of a strategy to come up with new things? And how can robots be aware that they have reached something new, except just moving further now with some other robot building?
Thank you for these questions. I think this is a very, very important point, right? So in my view, you know, trial and errors, of course, this is an important part of a learning and optimization and evolution and so on. But I don't think this is the main question about creativity, because what we want to deal with, you know, looking at just dancing, some of the speakers you talk about, right? You cannot construct all this dancing behavior, the dancing performance, purely trial and errors for millions of years, right? What the way how we create is mostly already given as a foundation of some, you know, it can be related to embodiment, can be related to culture, can be related to history, and so on and so forth. And we try to minimize the trial and errors as much as possible, because I think the physical motion, physical interactions require infinity amount of trial and errors. And if you want to create something really complex, I don't think we can actually do create something really complex purely based on the trial and error. So what we need to think about is some cultural atmosphere, cultural foundation, or some experience foundation that is used to minimize the trial and errors to create something really exciting, something really new. I think that's a real question we are trying to do, and especially folding paper problems. The sheet of paper requires millions of iterations, an infinity amount of trial and errors to find some interesting behaviors, and I think that alone is giving us a really, really good insight. But we should not purely thinking about the trial and errors as the most important things as a whole.
Thank you. So I think Andy was next.
Yeah. So, and I might draw Dr. Pakes into this a little bit as well, just because I'm conceptualizing a bit more on can robots dance. This is something that when my partner was visiting, who also studies philosophy, we had a lot of conversations on. And just like what it takes, or like what the ontological definition of dance is, because oftentimes I feel that we place this concept of dance on things that might not label themselves. Like when we talk about bees dancing, like would a bee say I'm dancing, or would it say I'm communicating, right? And so we conceptualize like the bee as being able to dance, or conducting a dance in a way of communicating and engaging. But like we can't ask a bee, like, are you dancing? That's not a concept that it really has, or that we can conceptualize it having. Robots get even more complicated in that, we are teaching it to have concepts, and we're telling it like what concepts are labeled, and from like an artificial intelligence standpoint, and we're training it to like believe in the construction of something, but it doesn't necessarily have like the autonomy to label things for itself. It doesn't have like the autonomy to understand culture in its own like distinct way. And so these are things that I like draw further into as we're trying to conceptualize like what the ideas of dance are, like what is actually dance. Can it be just any movement that we label as such? I don't know. I've been constantly stuck on that question for the past good number of years at this point. But the more and more I see stuff like Boston Dynamics putting videos of robots dancing out, the more I'm like, is this dance? Like, are the robots dancing, or are we just telling them to move? And then we call it dancing. And is the robot making that decision to dance? In Boston Dynamics case, it's not. It's being told what to do. But yeah.
I'm not sure this is a question to me, but so I'm not a philosopher, so I cannot really answer to your question how to define, how to think about what dance, what is not dance. But what I'm trying to do is really the borderline, right? From my point of view, folding paper actually look like a dancing, and the dancing robot as a program, repeating the program, is not really look like dancing from my point of view. But what I think really interesting from embodied intelligence point of view is that we probably need to think about the constraints given by the time and the space and physical properties of our body has something to do with the dancing in one way or the other. Because if there's no constraint, if you can do anything in computer graphics or in virtual world, maybe we don't feel as beautiful or as impressive as they are. And the way how we see the dancers or art in general is how we deal with all these constraints, right? In the physical constraints. And still we can actually create something we have never seen or we have never experienced. So that's how I take it. It's a soft definition of dancing from my point of view. But maybe philosophers or some real artists have a different views about this. I don't know. Maybe this is an interesting discussion topic.
Anna, do you want to join in, or I pass on to Pablo for the next question?
I think Pablo should go first. I might join in after he's spoken.
Okay, Pablo. Muriel, please.
Thank you very much for this fascinating presentation. And I would like to pick up a little bit on Daniel's reflection on trial and error, as a way to which extent you can arrive to a human behavior, some type of humanship through trial and error. And I was thinking that, for example, we as humans, we are not born on tabula rasa. There is like a lot of things, that they are not an emergent phenomenon of our interaction with the environment, that they seem to be there. And I think they are kind of crucial in developing art also, and also in our human lives, probably on the destiny of the planet. Somebody in Russia has some internal things, images that drive the behavior. And I think exactly you cannot reproduce via trial and error because we seem to have something, but at the same time, if we don't have a group, we don't develop what is distinctive of humans, like the posture, the symbolic imaginations, and many other things, that probably are in the way or in the road of these developments in robotics. So, well, my question was a little bit if is there a way to implement or to synthesize these kind of things, that come with us, if we are researching and learning about humans through robotics, these things that really go beyond this trial and error, and even maybe beyond the interaction with the environment in order to generate intelligence and a sort of psyche. Well, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Maybe the audio is slow, or okay, because it was a question for Fumiya.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm not really sure how we can structure this discussion of trial and errors. But one thing we know is that if you think about really long time scale of our life, right, from birth till the death, our body is actually very well programmed, right? We know exactly when we are born, and we know exactly when we stop growing, and we know exactly more or less when we die. And this is very well programmed, and there's no room for trial and errors over there, right? But within this framework, in the small tunnel, we actually do lots of trial and errors. So this is a kind of interesting way how I look at the embodiment, because we are walking in a very narrow tunnel, and then we just do a lot of trial and errors. But this tunnel can sometimes go in completely different directions when there's some evolutionary process happens, or some cultural revolution happens, or technology revolution happens. And this narrow tunnel, how these narrow tunnels are defined in the first place, but at the same time, narrow tunnel can be completely deformed all of a sudden. I don't know whether this you need to try and errors, or we actually don't know why this is happening, how this is happening. But that's a really interesting part from physics point of view or biology point of view about the trial and errors and the creativity. That's what I can say in this discussion.
Thanks, Fumiya. Pablo, I assume that's a legacy hand. Is that an old hand
Yeah,
got raised?
no, I understand. Okay. I'm going to turn off the video again.
So, Anna, do you want to just respond? And I think at that point we're going to have to pull things together to, well, to finish.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots that might be said about the kind of robots and dancing and the definition of dance. I guess one sort of standard answer to the question that Andy posed would be that, well, they are not dancing, but they can be seen as dancing. And the standard answer would be they're not dancing because they can't have reflective awareness of the fact that they're dancing, or because they can't formulate an intention to dance, and dance is an intentional activity. But one of the things I think is really interesting about the robots that you've shown, and also those discussed in that paper on behavioral objects by Le Villain and Zibetti, is the fact that it's so, as a human observer, it's almost impossible not to attribute intentional agency to these objects. And another thing I think that's interesting about them is because of it's almost as if their responsiveness to their context and to the forces at play in that context takes the place of intentional agency. So it would be really interesting to investigate the extent to which human intentional agency is a function of responsiveness to a context, rather than some kind of higher order intentional processing, and then to see how that then kind of plays out in how we think about what dance is and whether or not different kinds of being can do it.
Thank you so much. Daniel, I'll pass over to you, but just it does occur to it seems to me that it's like the dance conference equivalent of Godwin's law, that we end up at a conversation about what dance is and isn't, which I find deeply fascinating as as an old dancer, I guess. I'm just going to say, just from the perspective of Center for Dance Research, I just want to thank everyone for the conversation and your presentations and the ideas and the sort of sense of the provocations about how we understand, I'll say, bodies in motion. So thank you all for your attention and time, and it's great. And also, Daniel, before I pass over to you, just to congratulate you as well for this kind of full stop of sorts to your fellowship. So perhaps you want to have the final word here.
Well, I don't think I can say something particularly intelligent now. I just found it super inspiring to have this symposium with so many diverse inputs. I think it would have been good to have something like this earlier on during the fellowship. But I guess that's how projects work out. So during the planning of a project, you collect information, you collect inspiration, and then you're busy until the project ends, and then you can open up again the mind for new inputs. But so for me, I mean, this has been tremendously interesting now, this symposium. I'm super glad that we have recorded it so I can watch it again. And it's not, my fellowship doesn't, it ends as a fellowship, but the topic itself doesn't end. I will continue to work on this topic. I will continue to work on this topic together with C-DaRE and Motion Bank and Instituto Stokos. So it's super. This input is now really an input that has come at the very right moment in my research planning. And I look forward to benefit from it, and I hope everybody else also benefits from the input. A little bit logistics. So this symposium has been video recorded. I assume that this video recording will be available soon. So to those of you who have the email address, I will directly send the link to the URL where the video is online available. For everybody else, I will put it on my project blog, and it probably will also be visible somewhere on C-DaRE invites, so that you will find this. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. So I really, really want to thank everybody, the speakers for contributing, the audience for joining in, and I wish you a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Daniel.